I'll never forget the day I discovered what my mother-in-law really thought about me. I was standing in her pristine kitchen, arranging a platter of homemade lemon bars I'd spent hours perfecting. Another desperate attempt to win her approval. The kitchen door was cracked open just enough for Barbara's voice to slice through the air from the sunroom. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. That girl was never good enough for Nathan. A marketing degree from a state school? Please, the Mitchells have attended Ivy League for generations. My hands froze mid-arrangement, the powdered sugar shaker suspended above my carefully crafted dessert. And now she wants to contribute ideas to our family business? As if her social media nonsense could help a financial firm that served Connecticut's elite for 60 years. Diane Pearson, her lifelong friend, murmured something I couldn't catch. Living next door was the only solution, Barbara continued. At least this way I can make sure she doesn't completely ruin our family's reputation. Harold agrees. We need to keep them close. The powdered sugar slipped from my grasp, creating a small white explosion across the marble countertop. So, that was why they'd gifted us the house next door after our wedding. Not generosity, control. My name is Olivia Mitchell, formerly Taylor, and 3 years ago, I married into one of Oakwood, Connecticut's oldest and most prestigious families. On paper, it was a fairy tale, a middle-class girl from a small town catching the eye of Nathan. Mitchell, heir to Mitchell Financial Advisors and son of Oakwood's unofficial royalty. We met in New York, where I was building my career in digital marketing and he was finishing his MBA. Far from his family's watchful eyes, we fell in love in a world of tiny apartments and late-night pizza, weekend hikes, and ambitious dreams. Nathan was nothing like the entitled rich kids I'd prejudged him to be. He was kind, hardworking, and genuinely interested in my perspectives on everything from modern art to economic inequality. "You make me see the world differently, Liv," he used to say, kissing my forehead as we walked through Central Park. "You're not impressed by the things everyone in my world obsesses over." When he proposed after 18 months of dating, I said yes without hesitation. It wasn't until we announced our engagement to his family that the first cracks appeared in my fairy tale. Barbara Mitchell's smile never reached her eyes when Nathan introduced me at their Oakwood estate, a colonial masterpiece with manicured gardens and a view of the Long Island Sound. Harold, Nathan's father, assessed me with the calculated gaze of a man accustomed to evaluating assets and finding them wanting. "Marketing, how contemporary," Barbara had said over dinner, her voice dripping with the kind of polite disdain that only generations of privilege can perfect. "And your family is from Millerville, Pennsylvania," I answered, feeling my small-town roots like a stain on their immaculate tablecloth. "My dad teaches high school science, and my mom runs the local library." "Public servants," Harold I nodded, exchanging a loaded glance with his wife. "Admirable." Still, I was determined to make it work. Nathan assured me his parents would warm up once they got to know me, and I believed him because I wanted to, needed to. After our wedding, a lavish affair that felt more like a Mitchell family business function than our celebration, came their wee wedding gift, the house directly next door to theirs on Maple Avenue. "This way you'll be part of the neighborhood right away," Barbara had explained, pressing the keys into my hand. "And of course, Nathan can easily consult with Harold about the business. It's tradition for Mitchell men to learn directly from their fathers." I didn't miss that there was no mention of my comfort or preferences, but Nathan seemed so genuinely touched by the gesture that I swallowed my reservations. The house was beautiful, smaller than the main Mitchell estate, but still grander than anything I'd ever lived in. I told myself I could make it my own. That illusion lasted exactly 3 months. Every morning, Barbara would drop by with suggestions about housekeeping, neighborhood etiquette, or subtle critiques disguised as helpful tips. "Olivia, dear, The garden club notices these things, but the hedges really should be trimmed to exactly 3 feet. It's an unspoken rule on this street. That paint color is certainly vibrant for the guest room. The Richardsons next door might see it from their second floor. Just something to consider. But it wasn't just the house. It was the constant expectation that we would participate in Mitchell family traditions exactly as they had always been done. Sunday dinners were mandatory, with Barbara dictating the conversation topics and Harold dominating any discussion of business or politics. Nathan's sister Melissa and her husband Christopher would join, their perfect Mitchell manners and shared family references making me feel perpetually like an understudy who hadn't learned the script. Nathan mentioned you might have some ideas about updating the firm's marketing approach. Harold mentioned one Sunday, 8 months after our wedding. My heart leapt at finally being acknowledged professionally. Yes, actually, I've put together some thoughts on how digital strategies could help reach younger clients who are building wealth differently than previous generations. I reached for my phone, eager to show the presentation I'd spent weeks perfecting. How innovative, Barbara interjected with a thin smile. But the Mitchell firm has always relied on personal relationships. Our clients appreciate tradition, not, what do you call them? Hashtags? Harold chuckled. Nathan looked uncomfortable, and my carefully researched presentation remained unshared. After a year of this subtle undermining, our daughter Zoe was born, a beautiful, spirited little girl who became the center of our world. I hoped her arrival might soften Barbara's edges, but instead, my mother-in-law simply found new territory to control. Mitchell women have always used the family pediatrician, she informed me, placing a business card on our kitchen counter the day after we brought Zoe home from the hospital. I've already scheduled her first appointment. The nursery colors are lovely, but Mitchell babies have always had the family crib. It's been used for generations, she announced, appearing in our doorway with Harold and 2 men carrying an ornate, dark wood monstrosity that dominated the cheerful yellow room I'd spent months preparing. Even Zoe's name had been a battle. Barbara had pushed relentlessly for Elizabeth after Nathan's paternal grandmother. When we held firm on Zoe, I'd overheard her telling Diane it was unfortunately modern, and she would simply have to use Elizabeth as a pet name. Through it all, Nathan tried to mediate, caught between his loyalty to family traditions and his love for me and our daughter. Mom means well, became his mantra, along with, that's just how they are, Liv. It doesn't mean they don't accept you. But they didn't accept me. And deep down, I think Nathan knew it. My only refuge became my friendship with Amanda Wilson, another outsider who had married into Oakwood society. We met at a neighborhood playgroup that Barbara had insisted I joined to make the right connections for Zoe's future. The first year is the hardest, Amanda told me over coffee at Willow Creek, away from the prying eyes of the Oakwood social circuit. They test you to see if you'll break or conform. And what did you do? I asked, bouncing Zoe on my knee. Amanda smiled, a glint of mischief in her eyes. Neither. I found my own path. Created enough distance to breathe, but not enough to cause a family rift. It's a delicate balance. Her words became my lifeline, the possibility that there was a third option beyond capitulation or war. Then came the lemon bars incident when Zoe was just over a year old. After overhearing Barbara's true feelings, I fled her kitchen, leaving the ruined dessert behind. I drove to Riverside Park, Zoe babbling happily in her car seat, unaware of her mother's turmoil. Sitting on a bench overlooking the water, I called Amanda. She never wanted me here, I said, my voice breaking. The house next door wasn't a gift. It was a monitoring station. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Oh, what are you going to do? Amanda asked. That was the question, wasn't it? What could I do? We lived in their shadow, literally and figuratively. Nathan's career was intertwined with the family business. Our social connections in Oakwood all traced back to the Mitchell name. The beautiful house we lived in was in their name, another detail I'd overlooked in my initial gratitude. I don't know, I admitted, but something has to change. That evening, I tried to talk to Nathan about what I'd overheard, but he was distracted by a major client presentation the next day. Can we discuss this later, Liv? Dad and I are finalizing the Westridge portfolio, and there are millions at stake. I nodded, swallowing my frustration. Later never seemed to come when it involved criticizing his family. The next morning, I received an email that would ultimately change everything, though I didn't recognize its significance at first. A tech startup called Altitude Innovations was looking for a marketing director. Based in Denver, they specialized in financial technology for sustainable investments. Combining my expertise with Nathan's field, but with an innovative approach the Mitchells would likely dismiss. You should apply, Amanda encouraged when I mentioned it over lunch. Even if nothing comes of it, it would be good for you to remember your value outside of the Mitchell universe. She was right. That night, after putting Zoe to bed, I updated my resume and wrote a cover letter that reminded me of who I was before I became Nathan's wife and Barbara's disappointing daughter-in-law. I sent the application without telling Nathan, not because I was seriously considering moving to Denver, but because I needed to prove to myself that I still could. 1 week later, they asked for an interview. 2 weeks later, they requested a second interview and asked if my husband might also be interested in joining their financial team. 3 weeks later, as Barbara was lecturing me about the proper way to host the upcoming Mitchell Easter brunch, Mitchell women have always served deviled eggs with a specific piping technique, Olivia. My phone buzzed with an email offering me the position, with a salary that made my eyes widen and a relocation package for my family. That night, I finally had the conversation with Nathan that I'd been postponing for 3 years. I got a job offer today, I said as we got ready for bed, Zoe asleep in her Mitchell family crib down the hall. That's great, he said absently, checking his phone for emails from his father. Local? Denver. His head snapped up. Denver? As in Colorado? I nodded, handing him my phone with the offer letter displayed. They want you too. They asked if you'd be interested in heading their investment strategy division. I told them about your background, and they were impressed. Nathan read the email, his expression unreadable. Liv, you know we can't move to Denver. The firm, our house, my family, our whole life is here. Is it our life, Nathan, or is it your parents' version of what our life should be? I took a deep breath. I overheard your mother talking to Diane last week. She never wanted me here. The house, the constant dropping by, it was all to control us, to make sure I didn't ruin the Mitchell reputation. Nathan sat heavily on the edge of our bed. She didn't mean, don't, I interrupted. Don't tell me she didn't mean it. Or that's just how she is. For 3 years, I've tried to fit into a space that was never designed to include me. I've changed how I dress, how I speak, even how I parent our daughter to try to meet your mother's impossible standards. It hasn't been that bad, he protested weakly. Hasn't it? When was the last time you made a decision about our home, about Zoe, about your career, without considering what your parents would think? When was the last time we felt free in our own lives? The question hung between us, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker in Nathan's eyes. Just think about it, I said more gently. This could be our chance to build something that's truly ours. Not the Mitchells, not my parents, ours. I didn't push further that night. The seed was planted, and Nathan needed time to consider what growing it might mean, what he might need to leave behind, and what we might gain. The next day was Sunday, which meant mandatory dinner at the main house. As we dressed Zoe in the smocked dress Barbara had bought her. Mitchell girls always wear smocked dresses for family gatherings. Nathan was unusually quiet. "You okay?" I asked, watching him stare out the window toward his parents' house. "Just thinking," he said. Dinner proceeded as usual, Harold dominating conversation about the market outlook, Barbara subtly correcting my table etiquette, Melissa and Christopher playing their perfect supporting roles in the Mitchell family theater. But something was different. Nathan was watching it all with new eyes, as if seeing the performance for the first time rather than participating in it. When Barbara began explaining how we should handle Zoe's preschool applications, Mitchell children have always attended Oakwood Academy, and getting on the list requires specific connections. Nathan interrupted her. "Mom, Zoe's barely walking. I think we have time to consider educational options." The table fell silent. Nathan challenging his mother, however mildly, was an unprecedented departure from the script. Barbara recovered quickly. "Of course, dear, but these things require planning. Your father called in 3 favors to secure Melissa's spot, if you remember." "I remember," Nathan said, catching my eye across the table. "I also remember that I hated how rigid it was. All tradition, no creativity." Harold cleared his throat. "Mitchell Financial has been built on those traditions, son. Our clients expect a certain continuity." "Maybe," Nathan nodded. "But maybe there's room for evolution, too." It was a small moment, but it felt seismic. In the car ride home, with Zoe dozing in her car seat, Nathan reached for my hand. "Tell me more about this company in Denver," he said. The next 2 weeks were a blur of late-night conversations, pros and cons lists, and tentative dreams of what our life could be away from Maple Avenue. Nathan researched Altitude Innovations, impressed by their growth projections and innovative approach to sustainable finance. "They're doing what I've always thought the Mitchell firm should evolve toward," he admitted one night. "Dad dismisses it as trendy, but the market shift is real." I treaded carefully, not wanting to push. This had to be Nathan's decision too, our decision, not just my escape plan. Then came the email from Altitude offering Nathan a position as their investment strategy director, with a salary that matched his current one and equity options that could potentially be worth far more if the company continued its growth trajectory. "We could do this," he said, staring at his laptop screen. "We really could." "What about your family?" I asked, the question that had hovered over every discussion. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "I love them, but I'm starting to realize that loving them doesn't mean living exactly the life they've planned. Dad started the firm against his own father's wishes. Did you know that? Grandfather wanted him to join the family law practice. Dad never told that story when I was growing up. It didn't fit the narrative of unwavering Mitchell tradition." The next day, Nathan asked his parents to come over after Zoe's bedtime. As we sat in our living room, decorated largely according to Barbara's recommendations, I could sense their curiosity about this unusual invitation. "Is everything all right?" Barbara asked, perched on the edge of the sofa. "You seem tense." Nathan took a deep breath. "Olivia and I have something to tell you. We've been offered positions with a company in Denver. We're seriously considering accepting." The silence that followed was absolute. Harold's face reddened slightly. Barbara's froze in a mask of polite disbelief. "That's not possible," she finally said. "Your place is here, at the firm. The succession plan has been in place since before you were born. Plans can change, Mom. This is her doing, isn't it?" Barbara's gaze cut to me, all pretense of civility evaporating. "She's never appreciated what this family has given her, and now she's trying to take you away." "Barbara," Harold warned, ever conscious of appearances. "No, actually, it's not," Nathan said firmly. "The initial contact was about Olivia's position, but I pursued the opportunity for myself. Altitude Innovations is doing groundbreaking work in sustainable finance, work that Mitchell Financial has been reluctant to embrace." Harold leaned forward, Son, if you want to develop that segment here, we can discuss it. There's no need for such a drastic change. It's not just about the work, Dad. It's about building our own life. For us. For Zoe. Away from. He gestured vaguely at the window facing their house. Away from your family, Barbara finished, her voice brittle. After everything we've done for you both. The house, the connections, the legacy we've built. We're grateful, I said, finding my voice. But Nathan and I need space to build our own traditions, make our own mistakes, raise Zoe our way. And you can't do that. Here? Harold asked, his businessman's mind clearly calculating how to salvage the situation. Not with Mom dropping by unannounced every day, Nathan said gently. Not with the weight of Mitchell expectations dictating everything from how we trim our hedges to which preschool Zoe attends. Barbara stood abruptly. I have only ever wanted what's best for this family. If you can't see that, I don't know what else to say. That's just it, Mom, Nathan replied. What you think is best for us isn't always what is best for us. The conversation deteriorated from there. Barbara oscillated between icy silence and pointed accusations. Harold attempted negotiation, offering Nathan more authority at the firm, suggesting a different house with more privacy, but still in Oakwood. By the time they left, the battle lines were clearly drawn, though nothing was resolved. That went about as well as expected, I sighed as we closed the door behind them. Nathan looked drained, but determined. It's only the beginning. They'll pull out all the stops to keep us here. He was right. The next morning, Melissa called, tearfully asking how Nathan could even consider taking Zoe so far from her cousins. By afternoon, 3 of the firm's major clients had mysteriously heard rumors of Nathan's departure and called to express their concern. Barbara had organized an impromptu family support gathering at their house, which we declined to attend. Classic Barbara, Amanda said when I filled her in. She's activating the full Oakwood arsenal. Will it work? I worried. Nathan seems committed, but this is intense. That depends on how much he's prepared to risk, she replied. They're betting on his lifetime of conditioning to their expectations. What neither of us anticipated was how Nathan would respond to the pressure. Rather than buckling, he seemed to find new resolve with each manipulation attempt. I talked to a realtor today, he told me that evening, about listing this house. I stared at him. Really? But it's in your parents' name. Actually, he said with a slight smile, I had our lawyer check. The deed was transferred to me fully after our wedding. Mom and Dad can't prevent us from selling. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly believe we might escape Maple Avenue and build something new. That night, we stayed up late looking at neighborhoods in Denver, at mountains and open spaces so different from the manicured conformity of Oakwood. The next morning, Barbara arrived at our door at 7 a.m. sharp, an unusual hour for her carefully timed casual visits. We need to talk, she announced, marching into our kitchen where Nathan and I were having coffee. Your father has had a revelation. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Oh? He's willing to consider a significant restructuring of the firm's leadership. You would become co-CEO immediately, rather than waiting 10 more years as planned. Nathan's surprise was genuine. Harold Mitchell was not a man who relinquished power easily. That's unexpected, he admitted. Family comes first, Barbara declared triumphantly, clearly believing she'd found the perfect leverage. He's prepared to sign the paperwork next week. All this nonsense about Denver can be forgotten. I held my breath, watching my husband's face. This was exactly the kind of recognition he'd been seeking from his father for years. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, then said, Tell Dad I appreciate the offer, but it doesn't change our decision. Barbara's composure cracked. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, your birthright, and you're throwing it away for some startup in Colorado? No, Mom, Nathan said calmly. I'm choosing to build something new with my wife and daughter, something that's ours. That girl has poisoned you against your own family, Barbara hissed, abandoning all pretense. We welcomed her despite her background, gave her a home next to ours, and this is how she repays us? That girl is my wife, Nathan said, his voice hardening. And she has a name, Olivia. The fact that you still refer to her that way after 3 years tells me everything I need to know about why we need to leave. Barbara turned to me, eyes flashing. Are you satisfied? Destroying what took generations to build? I met her gaze, steadily. We're not destroying anything, Barbara. We're just choosing not to live in its shadow. After she stormed out, Nathan pulled me into a fierce hug. I'm sorry it took me 3 years to see what was happening, to see what they were. Doing to you, to us. Better late than never, I whispered against his chest, feeling a weight lifting that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since our wedding day. The next few weeks were chaotic. We accepted the positions in Denver, listed our house, which sold within days in Oakwood's competitive market, and began the process of dismantling our life on Maple Avenue. The Mitchell family response split along predictable lines. Harold shifted to businesslike damage control, Barbara alternated between icy silence and emotional manipulation, Melissa followed her mother's lead, and Christopher avoided direct involvement. What surprised us was the reaction from the wider Oakwood community. Several neighbors confessed they'd always found the Mitchell family's control a bit much. Friends we'd thought were firmly in the Mitchell camp expressed support for our new adventure. Even a few of Nathan's colleagues at the firm quietly admitted they envied his courage to break away. People notice more than they let on in Oakwood, Amanda told me as she helped pack Zoe's room. The Mitchell influence is powerful, but not everyone admires how it's wielded. The most unexpected development came 3 days before our scheduled move. Nathan's brother-in-law Christopher appeared at our door alone, a rare occurrence as he typically operated as Melissa's satellite. Got a minute? He asked, uncharacteristically hesitant. Over coffee at our kitchen table, now surrounded by moving boxes, Christopher revealed that he and Melissa had been considering their own move for years. She's afraid to tell Barbara and Harold, he admitted. But watching you two stand your ground, it's inspiring. Melissa won't admit it, but I think it's given her hope that there's life beyond Maple Avenue. There is, Nathan assured him. It's terrifying and exciting, but it feels right. The day before we left, I found myself alone in our nearly empty house. Nathan had taken Zoe to say goodbye to a few special friends, giving me time for one last walk through the rooms that had been both prison and home for 3 years. The doorbell rang, and to my shock, Harold Mitchell stood on the porch, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "May I come in?" he asked with uncharacteristic uncertainty. In the living room, he declined to sit, instead walking slowly around the empty space. "Barbara doesn't know I'm here," he said finally. She wouldn't understand. I waited, unsure where this was heading. "I started Mitchell Financial against my father's wishes," he continued, confirming what Nathan had recently discovered. He never forgave me for breaking family tradition, never met Nathan until he was 5 years old. This was news to me. The family narrative had always centered on unbroken Mitchell lineage and harmony. I swore I'd never let that happen with my children, Harold said quietly. That's why we've kept everyone so close. Why Barbara monitors everything so carefully. We were determined not to lose what we built. But in trying to keep everyone close, you risk pushing them away, I observed. He nodded slowly. Perhaps. Barbara won't see it that way. Not for a long time, maybe never. But I'm trying to. From his pocket, he withdrew an envelope. A wedding gift. A proper one with no strings attached. Inside was a check, with a sum that made me gasp. For your new home, he said. One that belongs only to you and Nathan and Zoe. Harold, I don't know what to say. Say you'll send pictures of Zoe. Say you'll let Nathan call sometimes to talk about the market. Say you'll consider coming back for Christmas. Not to stay, just to visit. I saw in that moment a glimpse of the father Nathan had always wanted. One who could recognize his son's need for independence while maintaining connection. We can do that, I promised. When Nathan returned with Zoe, I showed him the check and recounted Harold's visit. His eyes grew suspiciously bright. Dad never could express himself directly, he said, his voice rough with emotion. This is his way of saying he understands, even if he doesn't agree. And your mother? Nathan sighed. That may take longer. Much longer. The next morning, as the moving truck pulled away from 46 Maple Avenue, I noticed Barbara watching from her window. She didn't wave or acknowledge us, but she was there, witnessing our departure rather than hiding from it. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a kind of recognition. As we drove past the Oakwood town limits, Zoe babbling happily in her car seat about the big mountains we'd shown her in pictures, I reached for Nathan's hand. Ready for our next chapter? He asked. I looked back once at the Connecticut landscape, receding in our rearview mirror, then forward to the open road ahead. More than ready, I replied. It's time to build something that's truly ours. 6 months later, we're settled in our Denver home, a modern house with mountain views and no hedge height restrictions. Nathan thrives at altitude innovations, bringing financial expertise tempered with new perspective. I lead the marketing team, my ideas valued and implemented rather than dismissed. Zoe attends a progressive preschool she chose herself because she liked the big climbing wall. Harold calls weekly for brief, slightly awkward, but gradually warming conversations. He's visited once, marveling at both the mountain scenery and his granddaughter's newfound independence. Barbara sends formal gifts on appropriate occasions but hasn't yet worked up to direct communication. Melissa and Christopher have started discussing Denver job opportunities, testing the waters of their own potential escape. Sometimes in the evening, Nathan and I sit on our deck watching the sunset paint the mountains, Zoe playing in a yard that follows no Oakwood landscaping guidelines. Do you ever regret it? I asked him recently. Leaving the family business? The guaranteed future? Nathan watched our daughter inventing her own game with pine cones and imagination, something Barbara would have immediately redirected toward more appropriate Mitchell child activities. Not for a second, he answered. Some inheritances are worth walking away from to build something better. As the Colorado sky deepened to purple and stars appeared above peaks nothing like Connecticut's gentle hills, I silently thanked Barbara Mitchell for something she never intended. By trying so hard to make us conform to her vision, she had inadvertently given us the courage to create our own. Sometimes the most controlling people in our lives are actually the ones who set us free, by showing us exactly who we don't want to become. My application to altitude innovations felt like a small act of rebellion, a reminder to myself that I existed beyond the Mitchell family orbit. I didn't tell Nathan right away, not because I was being secretive, but because it felt like something that was just mine. After 3 years of sharing every decision, every thought, every plan with the collective Mitchell consciousness, I needed this one thing to hold close. The interview request came on a Tuesday morning while I was at the Willow Creek coffee shop with Amanda. My phone buzzed with an email notification, and I nearly spilled my latte when I saw the subject line. Interview request, marketing director position. What is it? Amanda asked, noticing my expression. I turned my phone toward her, my heart racing. They want to interview me. The Denver company actually wants to talk to me. Amanda's face lit up. Of course they do. When was the last time someone evaluated you on your actual skills, rather than how well you fold dinner napkins to Barbara's specifications? I laughed, but anxiety quickly followed. This is crazy, right? We can't actually move to Denver. Nathan's whole life is here. Is it, though? Amanda challenged, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. Or is it his parents' life that he's been slotted into? Have you ever asked him what he wants, separate from the Mitchell master plan? I hadn't, not directly. We'd had vague discussions about someday dreams, traveling more, maybe starting a small business together, raising Zoe to be independent and curious. But those conversations always ended with an unspoken understanding that our reality was Maple Avenue, Mitchell Financial, and Barbara's ever-watchful eye. The interview is virtual, I said, staring at the email. Next Thursday at 10 a.m. So do it, Amanda shrugged. What's the harm in exploring possibilities? What indeed? I scheduled the interview, blocking off the time in my calendar as personal development research in case Barbara performed one of her regular check-ins on my schedule, something she'd begun doing after I missed a Mitchell charity committee meeting to take Zoe to a music class last fall. That evening, I almost told Nathan about the interview. We were giving Zoe her bath, watching her splash happily among her rubber ducks, her curls damp against her forehead. Would you ever want to live somewhere else? I asked casually, helping Zoe pour water from a plastic cup. Like where? Nathan asked, distracted by Zoe's attempts to soak him. I don't know. Somewhere different. Not Connecticut. Nathan looked thoughtful. Sometimes I think about it. When Dad's being particularly rigid about the firm's direction, or when Mom reorganizes our kitchen cabinets without asking, my heart skipped. Really? Sure, he admitted. But it's just daydreaming. The Mitchell roots go deep here. He tickled Zoe's tummy, making her giggle. Besides, where would we go that would offer the same opportunities? The perfect opening to mention Denver dangled before me, but something held me back. A lifetime of Mitchell conditioning had taught Nathan that his best opportunities were here, under his family's guidance. I needed more concrete details before challenging that belief, specifics about the role, the company, the future it might offer us both. Just curious, I said instead, handing him a towel for Zoe. The days before my interview passed in a blur of preparation and mounting excitement. I reviewed Altitude Innovation's website obsessively, researched their leadership, team, and studied their approach to sustainable finance. The company was growing rapidly, with a mission that aligned perfectly with my personal values, something I'd had to compartmentalize while working within the Mitchell universe. Thursday morning arrived, and I arranged for Zoe to have a play date with Amanda's son. I dressed carefully in my home office, professional on top for the video interview, but with comfortable leggings below the camera's view. A small act of authenticity that felt significant. The interview itself exceeded all my expectations. The CEO, Lauren Chen, was warm but direct, asking insightful questions about my approach to marketing for financial services. Your resume shows impressive results with traditional financial firms, she noted. What attracts you to the sustainable finance space? I spoke honestly about my belief that the future of finance needed to balance profit with purpose, that marketing these services required authentic storytelling rather than the self-important tradition-heavy approach favored by firms like Mitchell Financial. That's refreshingly straightforward, Lauren smiled. Most candidates from established East Coast firms try to convince us they've always been secret environmentalists. I laughed. My father-in-law would have a coronary if he heard me questioning the Mitchell approach to client acquisition. Lauren's expression shifted subtly. Mitchell Financial? Are you related to Harold Mitchell? My stomach tightened. He's my father-in-law. Interesting, Lauren nodded. We've actually been trying to connect with their team about potential collaboration. Harold hasn't been receptive, but we've heard good things about the younger Mitchell, Nathan. Is it? My husband, I confirmed, unsure whether this connection would help or hurt my chances. Lauren leaned forward. Olivia, I'll be direct. We're looking for someone with exactly your background. Traditional finance expertise, but with vision for where the industry needs to go. And frankly, if you have insights into the Mitchell approach, that's valuable to us as we try to bridge the gap between old and new finance models. By the end of the interview, Lauren had hinted that they were strongly considering me for the position and asked whether Nathan might also be interested in speaking with them about opportunities. He's very much embedded in the family firm, I said carefully, but I can mention it to him. After the call ended, I sat in silence, my mind racing. This wasn't just a job offer shimmering on the horizon. It was a potential escape hatch from Maple Avenue, from Barbara's control, from the Mitchell master plan. But it would require Nathan to make an impossible choice between his family legacy and our freedom. I picked up Zoe early from her play date, needing her uncomplicated joy to center me. As we walked through Riverside Park, her little hand in mine, I tried to imagine us in Denver, surrounded by mountains instead of Mitchell expectations, building our own traditions instead of fulfilling Barbara's vision. Butterfly, Mommy! Zoe pointed excitedly at a monarch drifting past on the spring breeze. She took off after it, her curls bouncing, completely uninhibited by concerns about proper Mitchell decorum. Watching her, something crystallized in my heart. I wanted Zoe to grow up with that same freedom, to chase butterflies without worrying about getting dirt on a dress Barbara had deemed appropriate, to develop her own preferences rather than having Mitchell traditions imposed upon her, to become whoever she was meant to be without the weight of generations of expectations. That evening, I decided to tell Nathan about the interview, but fate intervened in the form of Barbara's unannounced arrival just as we were sitting down to dinner. I've brought the invitation samples for Zoe's birthday, she announced, sweeping into our dining room with a large portfolio. We need to decide tonight if we want the engraver to start this week. I exchanged a look with Nathan. Zoe's second birthday was still 3 months away, and we'd planned a simple celebration at the local park with a few friends and their children. Mom, we're actually thinking of something casual this year, Nathan began. Barbara waved dismissively. Nonsense. Mitchell birthdays are opportunities for community connection. I've already reserved the country club ballroom and spoken with the caterer who did Melissa's wedding. Without consulting us? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Barbara's smile tightened. I'm simply handling the preliminary arrangements, Olivia, as I've done for all Mitchell celebrations for 30 years. Zoe isn't just a Mitchell, I said quietly. She's also a Taylor, and neither family traditionally rents ballrooms for toddler birthdays. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Barbara turned to Nathan, dismissing me entirely. Your father and I feel strongly about maintaining certain standards for family events, particularly since the Hendersons and the Caldwells will be expecting invitations after we attended their grandchildren's celebrations. Nathan sighed, the sound of a man caught in a familiar vice. Can we discuss this later, Mom? We were just sitting down to dinner. Actually, Barbara brightened artificially, I thought I'd join you. I brought those heritage recipes I've been meaning to teach Olivia, the ones your grandmother insisted every Mitchell wife should master. For years, I'd been biting my tongue, accommodating Barbara's intrusions, telling myself it was easier to bend than to fight. But something about her presumption tonight, combined with the glimmer of escape that my interview represented, broke the dam of my patience. We already have dinner plans, Barbara, I said firmly. And regarding Zoe's birthday, we'll plan it ourselves. If the Hendersons and Caldwells are disappointed about missing a ballroom event for a 2-year-old, they'll survive. Barbara recoiled as if I'd slapped her. Well, I see someone's feeling rather full of herself tonight. She turned to Nathan. Perhaps you should remind your wife about the importance of family traditions. Nathan looked between us. Conflict. written across his features. This was the pattern: Barbara pushing, me resisting, Nathan mediating to keep the peace. But tonight, something shifted in his expression. "Actually, Mom, Olivia's right. We should plan Zoe's birthday ourselves. And tonight isn't a good time for an impromptu dinner. We'll call you tomorrow." Barbara's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. This deviation from the script, Nathan siding plainly with me instead of offering a diplomatic middle ground, was unprecedented. "I see," she finally managed. "Well, if that's how you feel, I suppose I'll leave these here for you to review." She set down the portfolio with exaggerated care. "Your father will be disappointed to hear about this new attitude." After she left, Nathan stared at the closed door, then turned to me with a half smile. Did that just happen? Did I actually stand up to Hurricane Barbara? I laughed, giddy with the small victory. You did. And the house is still standing. Later that night, after Zoe was asleep, we sat on the porch swing that Barbara had initially declared too informal for Maple Avenue, but which Nathan had installed anyway, one of his rare acts of rebellion. "I had a job interview today," I said finally, "with a company called Altitude Innovations in Denver." To his credit, Nathan didn't immediately dismiss the idea. "Marketing position?" I nodded. "Director level. It went well, actually." "Really? Well?" "Denver," he mused, looking out at the silhouette of his parents' house looming next door. "That's far." "It is," I agreed. "But the company is fascinating, Nathan. They're at the intersection of finance and sustainability, helping investment firms develop ethical portfolios without sacrificing returns. It's what you've been talking about wanting to explore at Mitchell Financial." "Dad says that's a passing trend," Nathan replied automatically, then caught himself. "Sorry, that's Dad talking, not me." I took his hand. "They asked about you, actually. The CEO knows about Mitchell Financial and mentioned they've been trying to connect with your father. About collaboration opportunities." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Dad's never mentioned them." "Would he? If it didn't align with his vision for the firm?" My husband was quiet for a long moment, the porch swing creaking gently. "Probably not," he admitted. "He's been particularly rigid lately about staying in our lane, as he calls it. The Mitchell lane, specifically engineered in 1963 and never to be repaved." Hope flickered in my chest. "The CEO suggested you might want to talk with them, too, about opportunities." "Leave Mitchell Financial?" Nathan looked genuinely startled, as if the concept had never fully formed in his mind before. "I'm next. In line for leadership. In 10 years or so. Or 15, depending on Dad's mood." "And in those 10 or 15 years, what direction will the firm take? Will you have any real influence, or will you be implementing Harold's vision even after he's nominally retired?" Nathan leaned back, staring up at the stars. "You know what's sad? When I started at the firm after business school, I had all these ideas. Sustainable portfolios, technology integration, reaching younger clients. Dad nodded and said we'd explore them at the appropriate time. 7 years later, we're still doing things exactly as they were done when I was in high school." "So maybe it's worth a conversation," I suggested gently. "Not a commitment, just exploring possibilities." "Maybe," he conceded. "But Denver live. That's a whole different life." "Would that be so terrible? A life we choose for ourselves instead of one chosen for us?" The question hung between us, weightier than it might seem to an outsider. For Nathan, considering a path outside the Mitchell blueprint wasn't just a career decision. It was contemplating a fundamental shift in his identity. The next morning, an email arrived from Lauren Chen with the formal job offer. The compensation package made my breath catch, significantly more than I'd ever earned, plus relocation assistance, flexible work arrangements for Zoe's schedule, and equity options. They requested a response within 2 weeks and reiterated their interest in speaking with Nathan. I forwarded the email to him at work with a simple message: "What do you think?" His response came hours later: "Impressive. Let's talk tonight." That evening, Nathan arrived home later than usual, his expression unreadable as he greeted Zoe and me. Only after she was in bed did he bring up the job offer, pulling up the email on his laptop at the kitchen table. "This is a serious offer," he said, scrolling through the details. "Senior position, excellent compensation, equity in a growing company." "But," I prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. "But it's in Denver," he sighed, "away from everything and everyone." "We know. It would be a fresh start," I suggested. "A chance to build something that's truly ours." Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "I had lunch with Dad today. He mentioned the succession planning committee is meeting next month to formalize the 10-year leadership transition." My transition. My heart sank. Harold's timing was never coincidental. "Did you tell him about this offer?" "No," Nathan shook his head. "But he did bring up Altitude Innovations, oddly enough. Said they were upstarts with unproven methods trying to capitalize on trendy environmental concerns." "What an interesting coincidence," I said carefully. Nathan met my eyes, realization dawning. "You think he knows about your interview?" "Oakwood is small, the financial world is smaller, and the Mitchell radar for potential threats to the dynasty is finely tuned," I replied. "What else did he say?" "That my future at Mitchell Financial is secure and promising, that our family legacy depends on continued strong leadership, and that Zoe deserves the advantages of growing up in the world we know." Nathan's mouth twisted. "Subtle, right?" "About as subtle as a Barbara Mitchell charity gala," I agreed. "The question is, does it change how you feel about exploring the Denver opportunity?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, tracing patterns on the wooden table that Barbara had selected for us. "Mitchell dining tables have always been mahogany, dear." "I want to talk to them," he said finally. "Altitude. I want to hear what they have to say, what they're building. No commitments, but I'm curious." It felt like the first crack in a dam, small but significant, the pressure behind it immense. Nathan scheduled a video call with Lauren Chen for the following week. In the intervening days, the Mitchell influence machine shifted into high gear in ways too coordinated to be coincidental. Harold invited Nathan to join an exclusive meeting with the firm's top clients, something previously reserved for senior partners. Melissa mentioned casually that her in-laws were considering selling their lake house property adjacent to the Mitchell family vacation home, perfect for us to purchase for weekend getaways. Even Christopher, usually above the family manipulation tactics, made a point of telling Nathan about the prestigious preschool that had miraculously developed an opening for Zoe, despite its legendary 3-year waiting list. Most transparent was Barbara's sudden interest in renovating our backyard. She arrived one Saturday morning with a landscape architect in tow, discussing plans for connecting our garden more seamlessly with the main Mitchell estate. "We could remove this fence section entirely," she was saying, gesturing expansively. "Create a unified green space between the properties. Zoe could move freely between both houses." The message couldn't have been clearer. The Mitchells were closing ranks, reinforcing the physical and emotional connections binding us to Maple Avenue. For his video call with Altitude, Nathan used Amanda's home office to ensure privacy. He returned looking energized in a way I hadn't seen in years, his eyes bright with possibility. "They're doing exactly what I've been advocating for at Mitchell. Financial," he explained, pacing our bedroom excitedly. "Ethical investment options that actually outperform traditional portfolios. Client education about impact investing. Technology that makes complex financial planning accessible to younger investors." "And," I prompted, hardly daring to hope, "and they've offered me a position. Strategy director, reporting directly to the CEO, with significant input on the company's expansion plans. He sat beside me on the bed, taking my hands. The compensation matches what I make now, but with equity that could be worth much more if they continue growing at their current rate. That's amazing, I breathed. How do you feel about it? Nathan's expression grew complicated. Professionally, excited. Personally terrified. What would it mean to walk away from everything here? My family? Our home? The firm I've been prepared my entire life to lead? Not everything, I reminded him gently. Zoe and I would be with you. We'd be building something new together. I know, he squeezed my hand. And when I try to separate what I want from what I've been told I should want, the idea of Denver becomes more appealing. Building something based on my values, watching Zoe grow up without the weight of Mitchell expectations, giving you the space to pursue your career without constant judgment. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully imagine it. A life beyond Barbara's scrutiny, beyond Harold's rigid plans, beyond the suffocating privilege and tradition of Oakwood. We don't have to decide tonight, I said. We have a week before. They need our answer. But that week quickly became complicated. Word of our potential move somehow reached the wider Mitchell circle, and the response was swift and coordinated. Invitations poured in for dinners, club events, and family gatherings, all featuring subtle reminders of what we would be leaving behind. Harold's golfing partners, coincidentally, mentioned Denver's unstable business climate during a Saturday. Melissa tearfully discussed how devastated Zoe's cousins would be to lose their relationship with her. The most direct approach came from Barbara herself, who cornered me at the mandatory Sunday dinner while Nathan was speaking with his father in the study. I understand you've received a job offer, she said without preamble, her voice low as she helped me clear dessert plates from the dining room. I shouldn't have been surprised that she knew, but my heart still raced. Yes. And you're encouraging Nathan to abandon his responsibilities here. It wasn't a question, but I answered. Anyway, I'm encouraging Nathan to consider what's best for our family, the three of us. Barbara set down the plates with exaggerated care. Olivia, let me be direct. Mitchell Financial represents 4 generations of family building. Nathan has been groomed since childhood to eventually lead it. His place is here, continuing that legacy. And what about his happiness? His chance to build something that reflects his values, not just his inheritance? Barbara's smile was thin. Happiness is fleeting. Legacy is forever. The Mitchells understand that distinction, even if it's beyond your background. The familiar sting of her classism felt different now, less intimidating, more desperate. You know, Barbara, I used to think you disliked me because I wasn't good enough for Nathan, but I'm starting to think you dislike me because I show him there are options beyond the Mitchell blueprint. Her eyes flashed. This is not about my feelings toward you. This is about Nathan's responsibility to his family, to this community, to traditions that have sustained us for generations. No, I countered quietly. This is about control. Your need to dictate not just Nathan's career, but where we live, how we parent Zoe, even which plates we use for dinner parties. Denver threatens that control. For a moment, Barbara's carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing something that looked almost like fear. You have no idea what you'd be giving up. The connections, the security, the standing in this community. These things take generations to build. And what would we be gaining? The freedom to make our own choices, to succeed or fail on our own terms, to raise Zoe with values that come from us, not from a Mitchell family manual. Barbara drew herself up to her full height. I've only ever wanted what's best for this family, including you, though you may not believe it. The problem, Barbara, is that you've never asked what we think is best for ourselves. The conversation was interrupted by Nathan and Harold returning from the study, but the battle lines had been clearly drawn. Later that night, I recounted the exchange to Nathan, expecting him to fall into his usual role of mediator. Instead, he surprised me. "She's scared," he observed. "They both are. Their entire worldview depends on the next generation accepting the same path they did. Our leaving wouldn't just be a personal rejection. It would challenge the foundational myth that the Mitchell way is the only way." "Does that change how you feel about Denver?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "Actually, it clarifies things. I keep asking myself what I would regret more, trying something new that might not work out, or never knowing what could have been because I was too afraid to step off the prescribed path." 3 days before our decision deadline, Harold made his most strategic move yet. He invited Nathan to lunch at the Oakwood Country Club, neutral territory, but steeped in Mitchell history. When Nathan returned, his expression was troubled. "He offered me co-CEO," he said, pacing our kitchen. "Effective immediately, not 10 years from now. Equal decision-making authority with him until he retires." My stomach dropped. "That's a significant change from the original succession plan." "It's unprecedented," Nathan agreed. "Dad has never shared control of the firm, not with anyone." "What did you tell him?" "That I needed to discuss it with you." He ran a hand through his hair. "This is what I've been working toward my entire career, Liv. The chance to help shape the firm's future, to gradually implement some of the changes I believe in." I chose my words carefully. "Do you believe you'd truly have equal authority? That Harold would allow significant changes to his approach?" Nathan's hesitation was telling. "He said he's open to measured innovation. That's practically revolutionary coming from him." "And if that measured innovation included the kind of ethical investment strategies Altitude is already implementing? The ones he's previously dismissed as trendy and unproven?" Another pause. "He said we could explore pilot programs next fiscal year." I took his hand. "Nathan, you know I'll support whatever you decide. But ask yourself, is Harold offering this because he believes in your vision for the firm, or because he's afraid of losing control?" That evening, we sat on our porch swing long after Zoe was asleep, weighing the Denver opportunity against Harold's counteroffer. The night was warm for spring, fireflies beginning to appear in the carefully manicured gardens of Maple Avenue. "Remember our apartment in New York?" Nathan asked suddenly. "That tiny walk-up with the noisy radiator and the view of the brick wall?" I smiled at the memory. "And the fire escape where we'd have wine on summer nights because it was the only outdoor space we had." "I was happier there than I've been since we moved to Oakwood," he admitted. Everything was possible then. We were building our life from scratch, making our own decisions, even our own mistakes. "We could have that again," I said softly. "Different setting, same freedom." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, watching the fireflies. I called Lauren. "Today," he finally said. Asked some additional questions about their long-term strategy, the role they envision for me. She mentioned they're planning to open an East Coast office eventually, said we could potentially return to this area in a few years if we wanted, but on our terms, not as satellites of Mitchell Financial. Hope bloomed in my chest. That would address one of your biggest concerns, being too far from family long-term. It would, he agreed, and it made me realize something else. Dad's offer isn't really about sharing power. It's about keeping me exactly where I am, under his roof, under his control, implementing his vision with minor tweaks that won't threaten the Mitchell way. In that moment, watching my husband see clearly through the fog of family expectations, I felt a surge of pride and love. The Nathan I'd fallen for in New York was re-emerging, thoughtful, independent, brave. "So what are we going to do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Nathan turned to me, decision written across his features. "I think we're going to Denver, Liv, and we need to tell my parents tomorrow." The weight and possibility of that decision carried us up to bed, where we lay awake whispering about mountains and fresh starts, about the look on Zoe's face when she saw snow for the first time, about building a life measured by our own standards rather than generations of Mitchell metrics. They won't take it well, Nathan warned as we finally drifted toward sleep. Especially Mom. I know, I sighed. But we can't make this decision based on managing their reactions. That's what we've been doing for 3 years. The next day, Nathan called his parents and asked them to come over after Zoe's bedtime. The hours until then passed in a strange combination of certainty and anxiety. We were making the right choice for our family, but breaking the news to Barbara and Harold would be like detonating a bomb in the carefully controlled Mitchell universe. Should we pack valuables? I joked nervously as we prepared dinner. In case Barbara decides to burn the house down? Nathan laughed, but the tension was palpable as we moved through our evening routine. Everything felt heightened, significant. Zoe's bath time, her bedtime story, the way the house creaked and settled as dusk fell. We were preparing to leave not just Maple Avenue, but an entire way of life that, for all its constraints, had become familiar. At precisely 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Harold and Barbara Mitchell stood on our porch, Barbara clutching her designer handbag like armor, Harold unusually somber. "Come in," Nathan greeted them, his voice steadier than I expected. "Let's sit in the living room." As they settled onto the sofa that Barbara had selected for us during our first month in the house, Mitchell living rooms always feature classic Chesterfield styling, dear. I saw them taking in the subtle changes we'd made to the space. Family. Photos that didn't match the Mitchell aesthetic, Zoe's toys that hadn't been properly stowed, the colorful throw pillows I'd bought against Barbara's advice. Already they were surrounded by evidence of our small rebellions. They just didn't know we were about to stage the biggest one yet. "Is everything all right?" Harold asked, his businessman's instincts clearly sensing the unusual tension in the room. "Your message sounded urgent." Nathan sat beside me on the love seat opposite his parents, our shoulders touching in silent solidarity. "Everything's fine, Dad. We just have some news we wanted to share with you in person." Barbara's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. In 3 years of Mitchell family dynamics, I'd learned to read the subtle signals, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the way her fingers tightened around her handbag. She already suspected something was amiss. "Olivia and I have made a decision," Nathan continued, his voice calm but resolute. "We've accepted positions with Altitude Innovations in Denver. We'll be moving at the end of next month." The silence that followed was absolute. Harold's expression froze somewhere between disbelief and calculation, while Barbara's face drained of color entirely. "That's not possible," she finally said, her voice unnaturally controlled. "Nathan, you can't possibly be serious." "I'm completely serious, Mom. It's a tremendous opportunity for both of us, professionally and personally." Harold leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees, his negotiation posture. "Son, I thought we discussed this. The co-CEO position, the accelerated timeline for leadership transition. We did discuss it, Dad, and I appreciate the offer. But this isn't just about my position at the firm. This is about creating a life that works for our family, for Olivia, for Zoe, for me." "By abandoning your family?" Barbara's voice rose sharply. "By uprooting our granddaughter and taking her thousands of miles away? By throwing away generations of hard work and planning?" I found my voice, keeping it deliberately gentle. "We're not abandoning anyone, Barbara. Denver isn't the moon. There are planes, video calls. We'll visit, and you're welcome to visit us." She turned to me, eyes flashing. "This is your doing, isn't it? You've never appreciated what this family has offered you. The connections, the position in society, the beautiful home." "Mom," Nathan interrupted firmly. "This was a joint decision. In fact, I was the one who accepted the offer first." That stopped her momentarily, confusion flickering across her features. The Mitchell narrative didn't allow for Nathan making decisions counter to family expectations. especially not ones that originated with him rather than his unsuitable wife. Harold, ever the strategist, shifted tactics. Let's all take a breath. Here. Nathan, Olivia, I understand the appeal of a fresh opportunity, but major life decisions shouldn't be made hastily. Why don't we take some time to discuss this properly? Perhaps review the financials, the long-term implications. We've done that, Dad, Nathan said, thoroughly. Altitude is offering competitive compensation, equity in a rapidly growing company, and the chance to shape the future of sustainable finance, something I've been advocating for at Mitchell Financial for years. Sustainable finance, Harold repeated with thinly veiled disdain. A passing trend capitalizing on political correctness. Our clients expect stability, not experimentation with unproven methods. I bit my tongue, remembering Nathan telling me that several major Mitchell clients had recently asked about ethical investment options, only to be steered back to traditional portfolios by Harold. The data doesn't support that position, Dad, Nathan replied evenly. Sustainable portfolios have outperformed traditional ones in 3 of the last 5 years. This isn't just about social responsibility, it's about recognizing where the market is heading. Barbara, clearly unwilling to engage on the business merits, returned to emotional leverage. And what about Zoe? Taking her away from her grandparents, her cousins, the community where her family has been established for generations? Children need stability. Tradition. Children need happy parents, I countered softly. Parents who are fulfilled professionally and personally, who are modeling independence and courage rather than obligation and compromise. How dare you imply? Barbara began, but Harold placed a restraining hand on her arm. What would it take? He asked, his voice suddenly businesslike. To reconsider this decision. A larger equity stake in the firm, a more significant role in shaping investment strategy, your own division to manage with minimal oversight. It was so quintessentially Harold, believing every problem could be solved through negotiation. Every person had a price at which their principles became flexible. Nathan shook his head. It's not about negotiating better terms, Dad. It's about building something that truly reflects our values. Raising Zoe in an environment where she's free to become whoever she wants to be, not who 4 generations of Mitchells think she should be. You speak as if this family has been a burden rather than a blessing, Barbara said, her voice tight with hurt and anger. Everything we've done, the connections we've cultivated, the doors we've opened, the legacy we've preserved, has been for you. For Zoe. I know you believe that, Mom, Nathan said gently, and I'm grateful for many aspects of my upbringing. But you have to understand that what works for you and Dad might not be what works for us. We need space to figure that out for ourselves. Space? Barbara repeated incredulously. You have plenty of space. A beautiful home, a generous yard. Not physical space, I interjected. Emotional space. Room to make our own decisions without scrutiny or judgment. Freedom to parent Zoe according to our values, rather than Mitchell traditions. Harold was watching us carefully, his analytical mind clearly processing the situation from multiple angles. When exactly did you make this decision? He asked. We've been discussing it for a couple of weeks, Nathan answered, since Olivia received her offer. And you didn't think to consult with your family before making such a momentous choice? Barbara's voice was sharp with disbelief. The irony of her statement, after years of making decisions about our lives without consulting us, wasn't lost on me, but Nathan responded before I could. We're consulting you now, Mom. We're telling you our decision and hoping you can support it even if you don't fully understand it. Harold stood abruptly, a signal that his patience was wearing thin. This conversation isn't productive in its current state. We're all too emotional to think clearly. I suggest we reconvene when cooler heads can prevail. It was his classic boardroom move, calling a recess when discussions weren't going his way. giving himself time to regroup and develop new strategy. "Dad, reconvening won't change our decision," Nathan said firmly. "We wanted to tell you and person out of respect, but the contracts are signed. We start in 6 weeks." Barbara gasped audibly. "Contracts?" Without even discussing, "Yes, Mom. Contracts. For jobs that recognize our talents and value our perspectives. For positions that will allow us to grow professionally while creating a healthier family dynamic." "There's nothing healthy about destroying family bonds?" Barbara snapped, standing to join Harold. "About rejecting traditions that have sustained us for generations. About depriving Zoe of her birthright." "Zoe's birthright is the freedom to define her own path," I said quietly. "Just as we're defining ours." Harold placed a hand on Barbara's shoulder, a silent signal to withdraw before things escalated further. "We should go," he said stiffly. "Clearly you've made up your minds without any consideration for how this affects the broader family." Nathan walked them to the door, his posture straighter than I'd seen in years, as if the decision to leave had already lifted a weight from his shoulders. I hung back, giving them space for any final words they might exchange privately, but Barbara turned at the threshold. "When you realize what a terrible mistake you're making," she said with chilling certainty, "don't expect an easy path back. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt." Her gaze shifted to me. "Remember that, Olivia." After they left, Nathan and I sat in silence on the couch, the magnitude of what we'd just done settling around us like a physical presence. "That went about as well as could be expected," he finally said with a humorless laugh. "Better, actually," I admitted. "I was prepared for more shouting, possibly some heirloom throwing." "Oh, don't worry," Nathan sighed. "This was just the opening salvo. Mom doesn't give up that easily, especially not when it comes to family control. We have 6 weeks of Mitchell manipulation to navigate before we reach Denver." He wasn't wrong. By noon the next day, the Mitchell mobilization was fully underway. Melissa called Nathan at work, alternating between angry accusations and tearful pleas. Christopher sent carefully worded texts, suggesting we were making a grievous, professional mistake based on temporary frustrations. Even Nathan's elderly Aunt Eleanor, who rarely left her estate in Westport, somehow found my number to express her profound dismay at our decision to abandon family traditions. But the most coordinated effort came from Harold, who activated his extensive network with military precision. By the end of the week, Nathan had received calls from 3 senior partners at top investment firms in New York, each mysteriously aware of his interest in new opportunities and eager to discuss positions that would keep him in the Northeast. Our family financial advisor called with concerns about the Denver real estate market and the stability of tech startups. Even Nathan's former business school mentor reached out to counsel patients regarding his father's succession plan. "It's almost impressive," Nathan remarked as we compared notes over dinner. "Dad's deployed every connection he has to create the illusion of unanimous outside opinion that we're making a mistake." "While Barbara works the emotional angle," I added. "Did you see the photo album she happened to drop off for Zoe? All pictures of Mitchell family gatherings with handwritten captions about special traditions and irreplaceable family bonds." Nathan shook his head. "Classic divide and conquer strategy. Dad handles the professional pressure, Mom handles the emotional manipulation, and they assume we'll crack under the combined weight." "Will we?" I asked softly, the question that had hovered unspoken between us all week. Nathan reached across the table for my hand. "No," he said with surprising conviction, "because for the first time in years, I feel like we're making a decision based on what we truly want, not what we're expected to want. It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I felt the same paradoxical mixture of liberation and fear." After years of careful accommodation and strategic compromises with the Mitchell way of life, our decision to leave was both freeing and disorienting, like stepping off a predetermined path into uncharted territory. The next phase of the Mitchell campaign arrived in the form of Barbara herself, appearing at our door the following Saturday morning with a stack of photo albums and a determinedly cheerful expression. "I thought we might have a proper talk," she announced, brushing past me into the foyer. "Without the tension of the other night. Is Zoe awake? I've brought some family mementos to share with her." The tactical shift was classic Barbara. When direct confrontation failed, switched to subtle undermining disguised as reconciliation. I'd seen her deploy this strategy countless times at charity committee meetings when someone opposed her vision. "She's at the park with Nathan," I replied, reluctantly stepping aside to let her in. "They'll be back in an hour or so." "Perfect," Barbara smiled with manufactured warmth. "That gives us a chance for some girl talk. I've realized I may have reacted strongly the other night. But you must understand it was coming from a place of genuine concern." I led her to the kitchen, mentally preparing for whatever strategy she was about to unveil. "Coffee," I offered, buying myself time to assess her approach. "Please," she nodded, seating herself at the island and arranging the photo albums with deliberate care. "You know, Olivia, I've been reflecting on our conversation. Perhaps I haven't adequately expressed how much we value your contributions to the family." I nearly dropped the coffee mug I was filling. In 3 years, Barbara had never directly acknowledged any contribution I'd made to the Mitchell family beyond producing Zoe. "That's unexpected," I managed, setting her coffee before her. "Is it?" she sighed theatrically. "I suppose I haven't been as expressive as I could be. It's the Mitchell way, I'm afraid. We tend to assume people know how we feel rather than stating it directly." She patted the photo album. "But family is everything to us, as these memories show." She opened the album to reveal carefully preserved photographs of Mitchell family gatherings through the years, holidays, vacations, celebrations. For all her faults, Barbara was a meticulous chronicler of family history. Nathan's 5th birthday, she pointed to a photo of a small, serious-looking boy in a miniature suit, standing beside a cake shaped like a stock ticker. Harold had just made partner at his father's firm. Such a proud moment for the family. I nodded, waiting for her to reveal the true purpose of this nostalgic display. "And here," she continued, flipping pages, "Nathan's graduation from Oakwood Academy. 3 generations of Mitchell men in this photo. Nathan, Harold, and grandfather Mitchell, all graduates of the same prestigious institution. A tradition Zoe would naturally continue." There it was, the carefully placed reminder of what Zoe would be losing by moving to Denver. "These traditions matter, Olivia." Barbara closed the album and fixed me with an earnest gaze that might have been convincing if I hadn't spent 3 years studying her manipulative techniques. "They provide children with a sense of belonging, of continuity. Surely you want that for Zoe." "Of course I want Zoe to have a sense of belonging," I replied carefully. "But that can come from many sources, from loving parents, from a community that values her for who she is rather than her family name, from traditions that Nathan and I create specifically for her." Barbara's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, yes, but there's something special about generational continuity, about knowing you're part of something larger and more enduring than yourself." She hesitated, then played what she clearly thought was her strongest card. "Something I would have thought you'd appreciate, given your own less established family background." There it was, the familiar implication that my modest upbringing made me somehow deficient, that I should be grateful for the opportunity to attach myself to Mitchell prestige. "My family may not have generational wealth or social standing," I said evenly, "but they gave me something equally valuable, the confidence to find my own path, the courage to pursue it, and the unconditional support to know I was loved regardless of whether that path met external expectations." Barbara blinked, momentarily thrown by my direct response. She quickly regrouped. No one is suggesting Zoe wouldn't be loved. Quite the contrary. We simply believe that certain advantages, educational, social, cultural, are her birthright. As a Mitchell. Advantages that aren't as readily available in Denver. She pronounced the city's name as if it were a regrettable medical condition. Zoe will have different advantages in Denver, I countered. The chance to grow up seeing both her parents engaged in meaningful work they're passionate about. The experience of building community based on genuine connections rather than social obligations. The freedom to develop her own interests without the weight of 4 generations of expectations. Barbara's facade of friendly reconciliation was beginning to crack. You make it sound as if the Mitchell legacy is a burden, rather than a blessing, she said, an edge creeping into her voice. For some people, it might be both, I suggested gently. Nathan thrives in many ways because of his upbringing, but he also feels constrained by aspects of it. We want Zoe to benefit from the positive parts of both our backgrounds while having the space to become uniquely herself. And you believe she can't do that here? Surrounded by family who love her, who only want the best for her? The question, Barbara, is who decides what's best for her? For 3 years, I've watched you and Harold make decisions about our lives, from which house we should live in, to which pediatrician Zoe should see, to which social events we must attend. Those aren't expressions of love. They're expressions of control. The pretense of warmth vanished entirely from Barbara's expression. You have a fundamental misunderstanding of how this family operates, Olivia. What you call control, we call care. What you see as interference, we recognize as investment in the next generation's success. Or perhaps, I suggested, you have a fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between supporting adult children and directing their lives. Before Barbara could respond, the front door opened and Zoe's delighted squeal echoed through the house. "Gamma!" she cried, spotting Barbara as she raced into the kitchen with Nathan following behind, carrying her tiny backpack. Barbara's expression transformed instantly, her face softening into genuine adoration as Zoe climbed onto her lap. For all her faults, her love for her granddaughter was unquestionable, which made our decision to move all the more complicated emotionally. "Hello, Mother." Nathan greeted her with a questioning look in my direction. I gave a slight shake of my head, indicating, "We'd talk later." "I was just showing Olivia some family photos," Barbara explained, hugging Zoe close, reminding her of the special traditions that make the Mitchells who we are. "Traditions change and evolve, Mom," Nathan said mildly, setting Zoe's backpack on the counter. "They have to, or they become rigid constraints rather than meaningful practices." Barbara's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "Some things shouldn't change, Nathan, family loyalty being chief among them." The tension in the kitchen thickened, but Zoe remained blissfully oblivious, happily examining the photo albums Barbara had brought. "Who dat?" she asked, pointing to a formal portrait of a stern-looking elderly man. "That's your great-great-grandfather Mitchell," Barbara answered, seizing the educational opportunity. "He founded the bank that eventually became part of Mitchell Financial. Without him, none of us would be here in this lovely house." "He grumpy," Zoe observed with a child's perfect candor, making Nathan choke back a laugh. "He was very serious. About family responsibility," Barbara corrected gently. "About building something that would last for generations." The pointed comment wasn't lost on us, but before the conversation could further deteriorate, I suggested Zoe might want to show Barbara the new picture she'd drawn at the park. My daughter happily rushed off to find her artwork, leaving the 3 adults in momentary silence. "This isn't a rejection of you, Mom," Nathan said quietly, "or of the positive aspects of how you and Dad raised me. It's about Olivia and me having the freedom to determine what works for our family, our primary family unit." Barbara's lips thinned. "After everything we've done for you both." "That's just it," I interrupted as gently as possible. We're grateful for the support you've provided, but it comes with expectations that we live exactly as you think we should. That's not support. It's a transaction. Family isn't transactional, Barbara retorted. Exactly my point, I agreed. Which is why your support shouldn't be contingent on our making life choices that align perfectly with your preferences. Zoe returned then, proudly holding up a crayon drawing of what appeared to be 3 stick figures standing beside something that might have been a mountain or possibly a very angular dog. Look, Gamma, is us in Colorado? Barbara's face froze in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Colorado? She repeated carefully. Mommy says we go see mountains and snow, and I can learn ski. Zoe bounced excitedly, oblivious to the tension her innocent revelation had created. Barbara's gaze shot accusingly between Nathan and me. You've already told her? Before anything is finalized? Before the family has had a chance to process this properly? It is finalized, Mom, Nathan said firmly. And yes, we've begun preparing Zoe for the move in age-appropriate ways. She's excited about the adventure, as children often are. How convenient that at 2 years old she has no concept of what she'll be leaving behind, Barbara snapped, then immediately softened her tone as Zoe looked up with confusion. Your beautiful drawing shows great artistic talent, precious girl. Grandmother is just surprised to hear about mountains, that's all. Sensing the adult tension even if she didn't understand it, Zoe fidgeted to get down from Barbara's lap. Go play dollies, she announced, toddling toward her toy corner in the living room. Once she was out of earshot, Barbara's expression hardened again. I cannot believe you would disrupt that child's life based on some misguided notion of independence. She has stability here, continuity, family who adore her. And she'll continue to have family who adore her, Nathan interrupted. Just not living next door. We'll visit, you'll visit, we'll video chat regularly. Denver isn't another planet, Mom. It might as well be, Barbara retorted. Do you have any idea how this will affect her development? Children need consistency, familiar surroundings, established routines. Children are remarkably adaptable, I countered, particularly when their parents are happy and aligned in their decisions. Barbara gathered her photo albums with quick, angry movements. I see there's no reasoning with either of you. You've made your decision without any consideration for the broader impact on this family. Actually, Nathan said, we've considered it deeply. We've weighed every factor, discussed every implication. This isn't an impulsive choice, Mom. It's a deliberate decision to build the life we want for our family. Your father will be devastated, Barbara said, deploying her final emotional weapon. After everything he's built, everything he's preserved. For you, for Zoe. The succession plan has been in place since before you were born, Nathan. Plans change, he replied simply. And Dad will adapt, as he's adapted to every other business challenge in his career. He's nothing if not resilient. Barbara paused at the doorway, her photo albums clutched to her chest like armor. This conversation isn't over, she warned, not by a long shot. After she left, Nathan and I exchanged weary glances. Round 2, he sighed, and that was just the reconnaissance mission. She'll be back with reinforcements, I agreed. Probably Harold with spreadsheets detailing all the financial reasons this is a terrible idea, followed by Melissa with emotional appeals about family unity. Don't forget Christopher with his carefully researched statistics about child development and geographical stability, Nathan added with a wry smile. The Mitchells never attack a problem with fewer than 3 coordinated strategies. We were right. The next 4 weeks brought an intensifying campaign to change our minds, each approach more targeted than the last. Harold invited Nathan to private meetings where he outlined elaborate financial projections comparing his future at Mitchell Financial to the uncertain prospects at Altitude Innovations. Melissa organized a surprise family photo session to capture precious memories before any changes, which somehow included multiple generations of Mitchells wearing coordinating outfits. Barbara, having failed with the direct emotional approach, shifted to community pressure. Suddenly, we were invited to every significant Oakwood social event, where longtime family friends coincidentally mentioned how rare and valuable it was to have multi-generational families remaining in the community. Zoe's preschool teacher called to discuss how difficult transitions could be for children her age, after a Mitchell donation had mysteriously funded new playground equipment. Through it all, Nathan and I held firm to our decision, drawing strength from each other when the pressure intensified. We began practical preparations for the move, researching neighborhoods in Denver, exploring preschool options for Zoe, listing our house with a realtor who wasn't connected to the Mitchell network. The last step proved most immediately challenging. Our realtor, Jessica, called 3 days after listing the property, her voice tight with professional restraint. "I've received some unusual feedback from potential buyers," she began carefully. "It seems several have been contacted with information suggesting there might be structural issues with the house that aren't disclosed in the listing." Nathan's expression darkened. "Let me guess. No specific allegations, just vague concerns that make buyers nervous enough to look elsewhere?" "Exactly," Jessica confirmed. "I've never seen anything like it. The source isn't identifying themselves directly, but the information seems to be coming from someone with detailed knowledge of the property. We didn't need to speculate about who was behind this sabotage. The Mitchell influence extended throughout Oakwood real estate circles. Creating doubts about our property was a simple way to complicate our departure plans. "We'll need to switch realtors," Nathan decided after we hung up. "Someone based in New Haven or Stamford, outside the immediate Mitchell sphere of influence." It was our first concrete encounter with the practical power the Mitchell family could wield when opposed, but it wouldn't be the last. The following week, Nathan discovered that his company credit card had been canceled due to suspicious activity, despite the fact that Harold served on the board of the issuing bank and could easily have verified the charges were legitimate. Then came the call from Denver. Lauren Chen sounded uncharacteristically hesitant. "Olivia, I wanted to touch base about something unusual. We've received some inquiries about Altitude's financial stability from potential investors who mentioned they had connections to Mitchell Financial." My stomach nodded. "What kind of inquiries?" "Questions about our funding runway, suggestions that our growth projections might be inflated, hints that our approach to sustainable finance lacks rigorous modeling." Lauren paused. "Normally, I wouldn't be concerned. We have solid financials, and our models are industry-leading. But the timing and specificity of these questions suggest someone is deliberately attempting to raise doubts about our viability." The Mitchell tactics were escalating from emotional manipulation to active interference with our professional futures. When I relayed the conversation to Nathan that evening, his expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Enough," he said quietly. "I understood the emotional appeals, even the community pressure. But this crosses a line. Dad is using his influence to potentially damage a legitimate business because he's unhappy with my career choice." The next morning, Nathan went directly to Harold's office at Mitchell Financial, something he rarely did, preferring to maintain professional boundaries by scheduling proper meetings. According to the text he sent me afterward, the conversation had been brief but decisive. Told Dad I knew about the calls to Altitude investors and the realtor sabotage. Said if it continued, I would go public with how Mitchell Financial treats employees who make independent choices. He denied direct involvement, but agreed the misunderstandings would be cleared up. It was the first time Nathan had openly confronted his father's manipulative tactics, and the effect was immediate. Our new out-of-town realtor suddenly found interested buyers scheduling viewings. The inquiries about Altitude's stability mysteriously ceased. Harold, whatever his personal feelings about our decision, was pragmatic enough to recognize when a strategy had become counterproductive. Barbara, however, was not so easily deterred. With Harold's more practical interference neutralized, she doubled down on emotional leverage, focusing increasingly on Zoe. Sadie was asking for Zoe at their playdate yesterday, Melissa reported, during an ostensibly casual phone call, referring to her daughter who was Zoe's regular playmate. She doesn't understand why her cousin is leaving. She cried for nearly an hour. Later that same day, Barbara dropped off a custom-made dollhouse, an exact miniature replica of the main Mitchell estate. So Zoe will always remember her family home, she explained, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. When those tactics failed to sway us, she deployed her final strategy, direct confrontation with our parenting decisions. Have you considered what this selfish choice will do to Zoe's sense of security? She demanded during what was supposed to be a pleasant family dinner 2 weeks before our scheduled move. Children need stability, familiar surroundings. You're prioritizing your own desires over her well-being. I'd spent 3 years biting my tongue during Barbara's critiques, prioritizing family harmony over defending my boundaries. But this crossed a line I couldn't ignore. What Zoe needs most, I said evenly, is parents who are fulfilled and authentic, who model making choices based on values rather than external expectations. Who show her that happiness doesn't come from social status or family pressure, but from living truthfully. How convenient that your version of living truthfully involves rejecting the family that welcomed you, Barbara retorted. Nathan set down his fork with deliberate care. Mom, that's enough. We're not rejecting family. We're choosing to live independently of family control. There's a significant difference. Control? Barbara's voice rose. Is that what you call everything we've done for you? The connections we've provided? The opportunities we've created? The legacy we've preserved for Zoe's future? Yes, Nathan said simply. When those things come with the expectation that we will live exactly as you think we should, make the professional and personal choices you approve of, and raise our daughter according to Mitchell traditions whether or not we share those values. That is the definition of control. Harold, who had remained unusually quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke. You're making a mistake, son. One you may not fully appreciate until years from now. Maybe, Nathan acknowledged, but it's our mistake to make. That's what you've never understood, both of you. We need the freedom to succeed or fail on our own terms, not to live safely within the confines of the Mitchell blueprint. Barbara stood abruptly, her napkin falling unnoticed to the floor. I see we have nothing more to discuss. If you're determined to break this family apart, to deprive Zoe of her birthright and her connection to generations of Mitchells, there's nothing more I can say. As she swept toward the door, Harold following with a regretful glance back at Nathan, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The final bridges were burning, but beyond the flames lay the possibility of building something new, something authentically ours. The 2 weeks that followed were oddly peaceful, as if the Mitchell family had collectively moved from active opposition to grieving acceptance. Barbara stopped her daily visits. Harold confined his interactions with Nathan to necessary business matters. Melissa sent a brief text wishing us well but declining to help with packing, as it felt too much like participating in a family fracture. Only Christopher surprised us, appearing one evening with boxes and packing tape. Melissa doesn't know I'm here, he admitted awkwardly, but I wanted to help and to say I understand more than you might think. This family can be. A lot. His small act of rebellion against the Mitchell United Front meant more than he could know. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe that our departure might eventually lead to healthier, more balanced family relationships. Ones built on mutual respect rather than control disguised as tradition. As our moving date approached, the reality of what we were doing finally hit me in unexpected moments. Zoe playing with the neighbor's child she'd grown up alongside, the familiar view of Long Island Sound from Riverside Park, even the predictable, rhythm of Oakwood life that, for all its constraints, had become comfortingly familiar. "Having second thoughts?" Nathan asked, finding me staring at our half-packed kitchen late one night. "Not second thoughts," I clarified. "Just acknowledging that even things we need to leave behind can still hold meaning. Parts of our life here have been beautiful, despite the complications." He nodded, understanding perfectly as he always did. "We're not running away from everything, just creating enough distance to build something that's truly ours. And maybe someday, when that foundation is solid, we can reconnect with the positive aspects of the Mitchell world without being consumed by them." One week before our departure, I was sorting through Zoe's outgrown clothes when the doorbell rang. Opening it, I found Harold Mitchell standing alone on our porch, his usual commanding presence somewhat diminished. "May I come in?" he asked with uncharacteristic hesitation. "There's something I'd like to discuss." I hesitated for just a moment before stepping aside to let Harold in. Unlike Barbara's dramatic visits, Harold rarely came to our house alone, preferring to summon Nathan to the main house or his office when he wanted to discuss something important. His unexpected appearance without Barbara as backup suggested something significant had shifted in the Mitchell strategy. "Nathan's not home," I said, leading him to the living room. "He's picking up moving boxes from the storage facility." Harold nodded, taking a seat on the sofa and looking oddly out of place, a commanding figure suddenly uncertain in territory that should have been familiar. After all, he'd selected most of the furniture in this room, just as Barbara had chosen the curtains and wall colors. "I didn't come to speak with Nathan," he said, surprising me further. "I came to talk to you, Olivia." I sat across from him, wary but curious. In 3 years of marriage to Nathan, I'd never had a one-on-one conversation with Harold that wasn't superficial pleasantries or Mitchell family business. "Barbara doesn't know I'm here," he continued, confirming my suspicion that this wasn't a coordinated Mitchell maneuver. "She's struggling with your decision more than she can express directly." "I've noticed," I said dryly, thinking of Barbara's increasingly dramatic exits from family gatherings and pointed comments about family loyalty. Harold's mouth quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Yes, well, my wife has never been known for her subtlety when it comes to family matters." He leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. "What you might not understand is why this affects her so deeply." I waited, sensing that Harold was building to something important, something that might finally help me understand the intensity of Barbara's opposition to our move. Barbara's family, the Caldwells, were once as prominent in Oakwood as the Mitchells, he began, surprising me with this unexpected history lesson. 4 generations of influence, social standing, considerable wealth. But her father made a series of unfortunate investments in the 1970s, followed by some inappropriate business arrangements that came to light at exactly the wrong time. I nodded, beginning to understand where this was going. "The family lost everything when Barbara was 19, Harold continued. "Their estate, their social position, their security. Barbara had to leave Radcliffe after her sophomore year because they could no longer afford the tuition. She was working as a receptionist at a law firm when I met her." This was a side of Barbara's history I'd never heard mentioned, a complete contradiction to the Mitchell mythology of unbroken prosperity and social prominence. "She doesn't speak of it," Harold said, reading my expression. "To anyone, not even to Nathan or Melissa. As far as they know, Barbara was born into the perfect Mitchell world she's worked so hard to maintain. She rebuilt her life through you," I said softly, pieces falling into place. "Through the Mitchell name and position." Harold nodded. "Barbara didn't just marry into the Mitchell family. She reconstructed her entire identity around it. Every tradition she insists upon, every social connection she cultivates, every detail of Mitchell life she controls. They're all part of her defense against ever experiencing that kind of loss and humiliation again." For the first time, I felt a flicker of genuine empathy for Barbara. Her controlling behavior, her obsession with social standing, her fierce protection of Mitchell traditions, all stemmed from a profound insecurity I'd never suspected. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Harold sighed deeply. "Because I want you to understand that what you perceive as manipulation and control comes from a place of genuine fear. When you reject the Mitchell way of life, even for valid reasons, Barbara experiences it as a threat to everything she's rebuilt." "That explains a lot," I acknowledged. "But it doesn't change the fact that Nathan and I need to make our own choices, build our own life." "I know," Harold said, surprising me again. "That's not why I'm here." He reached into his jacket pocket and removed an envelope, placing it on the coffee table between us. "This is a wedding gift, a proper one with no strings attached." I stared at the envelope, confused. "We've been married for 3 years. "Yes, and for 3 years our wedding gift was this house, which, as recent events have made abundantly clear, came with considerable strings attached." Harold gestured toward the envelope. "This is different." Cautiously, I opened it to find a bank check for an amount that made me blink in surprise. "For your new start in Denver," Harold explained. "To purchase a home that belongs solely to you and Nathan and Zoe. No Mitchell name on the deed, no Mitchell expectations attached to the property." "Harold, this is incredibly generous, but I don't understand. You've spent weeks trying to prevent us from moving." He leaned back, suddenly looking older than his 65 years. "I've spent weeks trying to save something I thought was essential to preserve, the Mitchell legacy as I've always envisioned it. Nathan following in my footsteps, Mitchell Financial passing smoothly to the next generation, family traditions continuing unbroken. And now? Now I'm trying to save something more important, my relationship with my son and his family." Harold's expression softened. "It took me too long to see it, but your leaving doesn't have to mean cutting ties. Completely. It can be an evolution rather than a rupture." I studied him carefully, searching for signs of manipulation beneath this apparent change of heart. "Does this mean you support our decision?" "Support would be an overstatement," he admitted with unexpected candor. "I still believe you're making a mistake professionally, and I worry about the impact on Zoe. But I respect that it's your mistake to make, your path to choose." The distinction was significant, perhaps the most Harold Mitchell could concede while remaining true to his convictions. "Thank you," I said finally, "for the gift and for the respect. Both mean more than you know." Harold stood to leave, straightening his jacket with the precise movements that characterized his approach to everything. "Barbara will come around. Eventually," he said, though his tone suggested less certainty than his words. "In her own time, in her own way. In the meantime, I hope you'll allow me to visit occasionally, to stay connected with Zoe's life, even at a distance." "Of course," I said, walking him to the door. "Denver has a very nice guest room that will always be open to you." As he reached the threshold, Harold paused. "One more thing," he said, his businessman's demeanor returning. "I've made some inquiries about Altitude Innovations. Their approach to sustainable finance is more substantive than I initially gave them credit for. Their CEO, Lauren Chen, has an impressive track record." Coming from Harold Mitchell, this was equivalent to enthusiastic endorsement. "Yes, she does," I agreed, hiding my surprise. "I've arranged to meet with her when she's in New York next month," he continued, "to discuss potential collaboration between Altitude and Mitchell Financial. I'd appreciate it if you didn't mention this to Nathan just yet. I'd like to approach him professionally, CEO to strategy director, once the arrangement has potential." I nodded, understanding the subtle olive branch Harold was extending. He couldn't bring himself to fully embrace our decision, but he was finding a way to maintain connection that preserved his dignity while respecting our choice. After he left, I sat on the porch swing, turning the check over in my hands and contemplating this unexpected development. Harold's visit had revealed a new dimension to the Mitchell family dynamics, one that suggested our departure might eventually lead to healthier relationships rather than permanent estrangement. When Nathan returned with the moving boxes, I showed him the check and recounted Harold's visit, watching his expression shift from surprise to cautious optimism. "Dad actually told you about Mom's family history?" he asked, clearly stunned. "He's never discussed that with anyone, as far as I know." "It helps me understand her better," I admitted. "Not enough to change our decision, but enough to feel some compassion for why she's reacting so intensely." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "And the potential collaboration with altitude. That's significant coming from Dad. He doesn't adapt easily to new business approaches." "Do you think it's genuine?" I asked. "Or just another strategy to maintain some control over our lives?" "With Dad, it's probably both," Nathan said with a wry smile. "He genuinely sees the business potential, but he also recognizes it as a way to stay connected on his terms. The difference is he's finally acknowledging our agency in the equation." The week that followed brought a flurry of final preparations, confirming our moving details, closing accounts, saying goodbyes to the few Oakwood friends who had supported our decision. Barbara remained conspicuously absent, sending Melissa to collect some family heirlooms she'd previously gifted to us, but now wanted returned for safekeeping. "Mom's taking this really hard," Melissa explained awkwardly as she boxed up the silver tea service that had been Barbara's wedding present to us. "She sees your leaving as a personal rejection, not just a life choice." "I know," I said, helping her wrap the delicate pieces. "But we can't live our lives to manage her feelings, Mel. At some point, adults have to be responsible for their own emotional responses." Melissa gave me a startled look, as if this concept had never occurred to her. "I suppose," she said doubtfully. "It's just that family has always come first in the Mitchell world. Individual choices have always been subordinate to the greater family good." "And that works for some people," I acknowledged. "But not for everyone. Not for Nathan and me, as it turns out." She was quiet for a moment, carefully placing the wrapped silver into a padded box. "Christopher thinks you're brave," she finally said, not meeting my eyes. "For making a clean break, for prioritizing what you and Nathan want over what the family expects." "What do you think?" I asked gently. Melissa sighed, her shoulders dropping slightly. "I think I don't know how to separate what I want from what I've always been told I should want. And that frightens me more than I can say." The moment of vulnerability was so unexpected from perpetually perfect Melissa that I impulsively reached out to hug her. She stiffened momentarily, then relaxed into the embrace, perhaps the first genuine contact we'd had in 3 years of being sisters-in-law. "You can always visit us in Denver," I offered as we pulled apart. "See how it feels to step outside the Mitchell ecosystem for a while." "Maybe," she said with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Once Mom's adjusted to the new normal." It was the closest thing to support I could expect from Melissa, who had spent her entire life conforming to Barbara's expectations. The fact that she was even contemplating a perspective different from her mother's felt like a significant shift. The day before our departure, Amanda organized a small farewell gathering at her house. Just a few friends who wanted to wish us well without the tension of Mitchell disapproval. As we chatted over wine in her backyard, watching Zoe play with the other children, Amanda pulled me aside. "Barbara was at the Willow Creek coffee shop this morning," she said in a low voice, "with Diane Pearson and that whole society committee crowd. They were discussing tomorrow's charity planning meeting, the one you obviously won't be attending." I shrugged, beyond caring about Barbara's social machinations. "I'm sure my absence will be duly noted and criticized." "That's just it?" Amanda said, looking perplexed. "She wasn't criticizing. Someone asked directly about your moving, and Barbara said, Nathan and Olivia are pursuing professional opportunities in Denver. We'll be visiting regularly to maintain Zoe's connection to her extended family. I nearly choked on my wine. Barbara said that? No dramatics? No implications of family betrayal? None, Amanda confirmed. It was her public position statement, the official Mitchell line on your departure. Perfectly polite, completely neutral. It was exactly how the Mitchells handled potentially embarrassing family situations, presenting a united front to the community regardless of private turmoil. The fact that Barbara was already shifting to damage control mode suggested she was beginning to accept the reality of our move, even if she couldn't bring herself to engage with us directly. Progress, I suppose, I mused, or at least pragmatism. That evening, as Nathan and I did one final check of our packed belongings, with Zoe already asleep in her stripped-down bedroom, the doorbell rang. Given the late hour, I expected it might be Harold with some last-minute business matter for Nathan. Instead, Barbara stood on our porch, looking uncharacteristically uncertain, a small gift bag clutched in her hands. "May I come in?" she asked, stiffly. "I won't stay long." Nathan and I exchanged surprised glances before stepping aside to let her enter. The living room was bare except for the furniture we were leaving behind. All Mitchell-selected pieces that never felt fully ours. "I brought something for Zoe," Barbara said, holding out the gift bag, "for her journey tomorrow." Nathan took it, peering inside to find a small, beautifully crafted wooden box. Opening it revealed a delicate gold locket on a child-sized chain. "It was mine when I was a girl," Barbara explained, her voice carefully controlled. "My grandmother gave it to me. It's one of the few pieces I kept when, well, it has sentimental value beyond its monetary worth." The oblique reference to her family's financial downfall, something she never acknowledged directly, caught us both by surprise. "It's beautiful, Mom," Nathan said softly. "Zoe will treasure it." Barbara nodded stiffly. "There are photographs. Inside, one of your father and me, one of Zoe as a baby." I thought, children should have tangible connections to their family history, even when circumstances change. The gesture was complex, simultaneously a gift and a reminder, an acceptance of our departure and an assertion of continued Mitchell presence in Zoe's life. Exactly the kind of layered communication that characterized Barbara's approach to family dynamics. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "It means a lot that you want Zoe to carry this connection with her." Barbara's gaze swept over the packed boxes, the bare walls where family photographs had hung, the emptiness that signified our imminent departure. For a moment, her carefully maintained composure wavered, and I glimpsed the genuine pain beneath her controlling exterior. "I don't approve of this decision," she said finally, her voice tight. "I believe you're making a mistake that will have consequences you don't yet fully appreciate. But I don't want to lose my relationship with my granddaughter. Or with you, Nathan, though you seem determined to reject everything your father and I have built for you." "Mom," Nathan said gently, "leaving Oakwood doesn't mean rejecting our family. It means creating enough space to build something that's authentically ours, without constant oversight and direction." "Space," Barbara repeated skeptically. "Thousands of miles of it." "Physical distance doesn't have to mean emotional distance," I offered. "We want Zoe to know her grandparents, to understand her family history, but on terms that respect our autonomy as her parents and as adults." Barbara's lips thinned. "And if our perspectives on what's best for her differ from yours? If our experience suggests approaches you haven't considered?" "Then we listen," Nathan said. "We consider your input. We make our own decisions, which sometimes might align with your views and sometimes won't. That's what healthy adult relationships look like, Mom." Barbara was silent for a long moment, absorbing his words with an unreadable expression. "Harold tells me he's considering some kind of business arrangement with this Denver company of yours," she finally said, changing directions abruptly. He mentioned something about exploring collaboration possibilities, Nathan confirmed cautiously. He seems to think they have a viable approach to those environmental investment strategies you've been going on about for years. Barbara's tone suggested she remained unconvinced, but was making an effort to engage. Perhaps if the partnership proves fruitful, it might eventually bring you back to Oakwood. In a different capacity, of course. And there it was. Barbara couldn't fully accept our independence, but she was already constructing a narrative that allowed for our eventual return to the Mitchell fold. It wasn't support for our current decision so much as a long-term strategy for bringing us back into alignment with her vision. "We're taking this one step at a time, Mom," Nathan said diplomatically. "Starting with building our life in Denver and seeing where the opportunity leads us." Barbara straightened her shoulders, smoothing her already perfect hair in a gesture I recognized as self-soothing. "Well, I should let you finish your preparations. You have an early start tomorrow." As she turned to leave, I was struck by how much smaller she seemed without the backdrop of the main Mitchell estate. How human, rather than mythic. For all her manipulation and control, Barbara was fundamentally a woman terrified of losing the security she'd rebuilt after her family's downfall. "Barbara," I said impulsively, "we'll send pictures regularly and update you on Zoe's activities. And when you're ready to visit, there will always be a place for you." She paused, her back to us, and for a moment I thought she might ignore the olive branch entirely. Then she nodded once, a barely perceptible movement. "Safe travels," she said quietly, and walked out the door. After she left, Nathan and I sat on the floor of our empty living room, leaning against each other in the shared understanding that while barriers remained, small cracks had appeared in the Mitchell wall of opposition. "That's as close to acceptance as we're likely to get from Mom right now," Nathan observed. The locket was significant. She never shares anything from her pre-Mitchell life. Harold's visit, Barbara's gift, they're both finding ways to maintain connection while saving face, I agreed. It's not perfect, but it's something we can build on from a distance. Morning came with the soft pink light of early spring, our moving truck already waiting in the driveway as we carried the last few bags to our car. Zoe was excited about the big adventure, chattering about mountains and snow as Nathan secured her car seat. I took one final walk through the empty house that had never quite felt like home despite the 3 years we'd spent inside its walls. In the kitchen, I was surprised to find a small basket on the counter that hadn't been there the night before. Inside was a loaf of freshly baked bread, a jar of local honey, and a handwritten note in Harold's distinctive script. An old Mitchell tradition, bread and honey for sweetness in a new home. Safe journey. H. Alongside it was a slim envelope containing 2 first-class plane tickets from Denver to Connecticut, dated for Christmas, and a brief note in Barbara's elegant handwriting. "For when you're ready to visit, the guest rooms in the main house will be prepared." B. Their separate gestures perfectly encapsulated their different approaches. Harold's straightforward acknowledgement of our new beginning, Barbara's careful framing of our departure as temporary, but both represented tentative acceptance that would have seemed impossible weeks earlier. As I joined Nathan and Zoe in the car, tucking the basket and envelope safely in my bag, I glanced up at the main Mitchell house next door. Barbara and Harold stood on their front porch, a carefully calculated distance, present to witness our departure but maintaining plausible deniability about emotional goodbyes. Harold raised his hand in a subdued wave. Barbara simply stood, straight-backed beside him, her expression composed but watchful. Nathan honked once as we pulled away, a simple acknowledgement of their presence. In the rearview mirror, I saw Harold's arm go around Barbara's shoulders as our car turned the corner, leaving Maple Avenue behind. The 4-hour drive to the airport provided time for reflection as Zoe napped in her car seat, the familiarity of the Connecticut landscape gradually giving way to the outskirts of New York. Nathan reached across the console to take my hand. his expression both resolute and contemplative. "Having second thoughts?" I asked softly. He shook his head. "No second thoughts, just acknowledging the complexity. We're not just leaving a place or jobs, we're fundamentally changing our family dynamic, creating a new center of gravity for ourselves rather than orbiting the Mitchell sun." "It's the right decision," I said, squeezing his hand. "For us, for Zoe. But it doesn't have to be a complete severing. Your parents are finding their own ways to adapt, however imperfectly." "That's what gives me hope," Nathan admitted. "Dad's business overture, Mom's gift for Zoe. They're small gestures, but significant from people who rarely compromise." In the back seat, Zoe stirred, opening sleepy eyes to the unfamiliar highway scenery. "We go mountains now?" she asked, her voice heavy with lingering drowsiness. "Soon, sweetheart," I promised. "We have to take an airplane first, remember? Like we talked about?" She nodded seriously. "Fly high in the sky, then new house with my own room that I can paint purple if I want." Nathan and I exchanged smiles at this declaration, one of many small freedoms we'd promised Zoe in our new life, freedoms that would have been unthinkable under Barbara's watchful eye on Maple Avenue. "That's right," Nathan confirmed. "Purple walls, if that's what you choose, and a view of the mountains from your window." "And Gamma and Grandpa can visit," Zoe continued, reciting the narrative we'd carefully constructed to help her process the transition. "But not live next door anymore." "Exactly," I said, turning to meet her eyes. "They'll visit sometimes, and we'll visit them sometimes. But our new home will be just for us. You, me, and Daddy." "I like just us," Zoe declared with a child's simple certainty, then immediately switched focus to the toy. Rabbit clutched in her small hands. "Mr. Hoppy likes mountains too." As we approached the airport, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it briefly, then passed it to me with raised eyebrows. It was from Christopher. "Checking in about your Denver house hunt. Melissa and I might be looking for a change of scenery ourselves in the next year or so. Keep us posted on neighborhoods with good schools." I stared at the message in surprise. Christopher and Melissa, the most compliant members of the Mitchell orbit, were contemplating their own escape? Our departure had clearly catalyzed something beyond our own family unit. "Interesting developments," Nathan murmured as I handed back his phone. "Seems like we might be creating a template rather than an exception." At the airport, we navigated the familiar chaos of check-in lines and security screening, Zoe alternating between excitement about the airplane and protest at having to temporarily surrender Mr. Hoppy to the X-ray machine. By the time we reached our gate, the reality of our journey was setting in. Not just the physical distance we were about to travel, but the psychological space we were creating between the Mitchell expectations and our own aspirations. As we settled into our seats on the plane, Zoe pressed against the window with wide-eyed fascination while Nathan stored our carry-on bags overhead. I checked my phone one last time before switching it to airplane mode, finding a new email notification from an unexpected source. The subject line read simply, "For your consideration when you're settled." The sender was Barbara Mitchell. Opening it quickly, I found a brief message. "Olivia, while I don't agree with your decision, I respect that it's been made. Attached are contacts for several respected interior designers in the Denver area who understand quality and tradition. Also included is information about the Willow Creek Preschool, which has an excellent reputation and a progressive approach that might appeal to your educational philosophy for Zoe. Harold and I have made preliminary arrangements to visit during Thanksgiving week, if that timing suits your schedule. Please confirm. Barbara." It was as close to extending an olive branch as Barbara Mitchell was capable of at this point, simultaneously acknowledging our decision while maintaining her vision of appropriate standards and asserting her continued role in our lives. The suggested Thanksgiving visit was particularly telling. A clear statement that despite our geographical separation, she still expected us to maintain our place in the Mitchell family calendar. "Everything okay?" Nathan asked, settling into the seat beside me. "You look surprised." I showed him the email, watching his expression shift from astonishment to thoughtful consideration. "It's very Mom," he finally said. "Can't quite bring herself to support our choice directly, but finding ways to insert herself into it constructively." "Progress," I agreed, tucking my phone away as the flight attendants began their safety demonstration. Imperfect, complicated, progress. As our plane accelerated down the runway, Zoe squealed with delight at the sensation of lifting off, her small hands pressed against the window as Connecticut fell away beneath us. Nathan and I exchanged a look of shared understanding, acknowledgement of what we were leaving behind combined with anticipation for what lay ahead. The Mitchell influence would never completely vanish from our lives. It was part of Nathan's history, part of Zoe's heritage. But from now on, it would be just one element in the life we were actively choosing to build, not the gravitational center around which everything else orbited. "Ready?" Nathan asked quietly, taking my hand as the plane leveled off, Connecticut now just a patchwork of diminishing landscapes below us. I thought of Barbara standing straight-backed on her porch, of Harold's bread and honey tradition, of Christopher, and Melissa contemplating their own path to independence, of Zoe excited about purple walls and mountain views. I thought of the complex family bonds that would need to be renegotiated from a position of strength rather than obligation. "More than ready," I replied, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "This is just the beginning." Our arrival in Denver felt like stepping into a different dimension. The air was clearer, the sky impossibly wide, and the mountains on the horizon seemed to promise possibilities that the confined perfection of Oakwood could never offer. After the chaos of baggage claim and rental car arrangements, we drove to the extended stay apartment we'd booked for our first month, giving us time to find the right permanent home without pressure. Zoe, usually cranky after long journeys, seemed energized by the change of scenery. She pressed her face against the car window, pointing excitedly at the mountains visible from nearly everywhere in the city. "So big!" she exclaimed. "We climb them?" "Someday," Nathan promised, catching my eye with a smile. "When you're a little older." The apartment was modern and impersonal, the opposite of our Mitchell-curated house on Maple Avenue, but it felt strangely liberating. Blank walls waiting for our choices, furniture arranged for function rather than appearance. No Barbara dropping by to adjust the throw pillows or rearrange the kitchen organization. Our first week passed in a blur of orientation meetings at Altitude Innovations, preschool tours for Zoe, and preliminary house hunting expeditions. The company culture was everything Lauren had promised. Dynamic, purpose-driven, welcoming of fresh perspectives. Nathan's expertise in traditional finance was valued rather than constrained, and my marketing ideas were implemented rather than politely dismissed. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me why my approach won't work here," Nathan confessed after successfully pitching a new client outreach strategy during his first week. At Mitchell Financial, every innovation had to clear 4 committees and a legacy check before being considered. "Welcome to the world of meritocracy rather than inheritance," I teased, though we both recognized the profound truth underlying the joke. Finding the right house took longer than expected. The Denver market was competitive, and our standards were specific, not just in terms of location and amenities, but in the less tangible sense of finding a space that felt entirely our own, with no echoes of Mitchell expectations. "What about this one?" our realtor Rebecca asked, showing us a striking contemporary home with mountain views and an open floor plan. "It has that indoor-outdoor flow you mentioned wanting, and the neighborhood has excellent schools." The house was beautiful, but something felt off as we toured it. A certain formality to the layout, perhaps, or the way the kitchen was designed more for appearance than functionality. "It reminds me of something Barbara would approve of," I whispered to Nathan as Rebecca checked the property details in another room. "Impressive rather than comfortable." He nodded, relief in his eyes that I'd articulated what he was feeling. "Exactly. It feels like we're still trying to meet Mitchell's standards, just in a different location." We eventually found our home. In an unexpected place, a mid-century modern house nestled against a hillside in a diverse neighborhood filled with artists, professors, and young families. The house needed updates and had quirky features that would have horrified Barbara. A bright turquoise front door, skylights in unexpected places, a kitchen that prioritized creativity over formal entertaining. But the moment we walked in, we both felt it, the sense of possibility, of a space we could truly make our own without the weight of external expectations. "Purple room?" Zoe asked hopefully, running through the hallway that would lead to her bedroom. "Absolutely," Nathan assured her. "Any color you want." Harold's check made the purchase possible without depleting our savings, a fact that wasn't lost on either of us. Whatever his misgivings about our move, his financial support had given us the freedom to choose a home that truly reflected our values, rather than settling for what we could immediately afford. While Nathan handled the closing paperwork, I sent Harold and Barbara photos of the house, not seeking approval, but keeping the door of communication open. Harold responded with practical questions about the inspection report and property taxes. Barbara's reply was predictably Barbara. "The architecture is certainly unique. I've taken the liberty of researching interior designers in your area, who might help bring some traditional elements into the more eclectic spaces. The kitchen appears to need significant updating if you plan to entertain properly." 6 months earlier, her critique would have stung. Now I found myself smiling at her inability to simply say congratulations. Progress came in small steps. With Barbara Mitchell. Moving day arrived with unexpected support. Lauren had arranged for several Altitude employees to help unload boxes and assemble furniture, creating an impromptu welcome party that turned work into celebration. As we arranged our furniture according to function and preference rather than rigid design rules, I realized how much mental energy I'd previously expended trying to maintain Barbara's standards. "The sofa looks better facing the view instead of the fireplace," I suggested, breaking one of Barbara's cardinal rules about proper living room arrangement. "Absolutely rebellious," Nathan agreed with a grin, helping me rotate the piece. "Next thing you know, we'll be using the formal dining room for crafts projects." "Don't tempt me," I laughed, already envisioning the Mitchell heirloom dining table, which we'd left behind, covered in Zoe's finger paints and glitter. That evening, after our helpers had departed and Zoe was asleep in her still unpainted bedroom, Nathan and I sat on our back deck with glasses of wine, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. The silence between us was comfortable. No tension of unspoken Mitchell expectations, no mental calculations about potential judgment. "This feels right," Nathan said finally, his voice soft in the gathering twilight. "It's been so long since—" I made a decision that wasn't filtered through the lens of family expectation that I'd forgotten what it feels like. "It's not just the house or the job," I agreed. "It's the knowing that our choices are truly ours, for better or worse." He nodded, taking my hand. "I didn't realize how much I needed this until we got here. Space to breathe, to think, to figure out who we are beyond the Mitchell blueprint." The coming weeks brought a rhythm to our new life, demanding but fulfilling. Work at Altitude, weekend explorations of our new city, watching Zoe blossom in a preschool environment that encouraged curiosity rather than conformity. We painted her room the promised shade of purple, hung artwork because we loved it rather than because it signaled the right cultural affiliations, and gradually transformed the house into a home that reflected our actual preferences rather than inherited expectations. The Mitchell influence remained present but muted. Regular video calls with Harold and Barbara that were sometimes awkward but increasingly cordial. Occasional care packages from Melissa containing East Coast treats, and family photos. Text messages from Christopher asking surprisingly insightful questions about Denver neighborhoods and job markets. 3 months after our move, Nathan received an unexpected email from his father, marked Confidential, Mitchell Financial Altitude Innovations Potential Partnership. Attached was a detailed proposal for collaboration between the two firms, Mitchell, providing established client relationships and financial infrastructure, Altitude contributing innovative sustainable investment products and technological expertise. "This is legitimate," Nathan said with surprise after reviewing the documents. "Not a token gesture or a way to bring us back into the fold. Dad's actually proposing a substantive business relationship that would benefit both companies. And conveniently create a professional reason for regular contact between Denver and Oakwood," I observed, though without the cynicism that might have colored such an observation months earlier. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, but that's actually smart business in this case. The partnership makes sense financially and strategically. The fact that it also serves Dad's personal goal of maintaining connection is just efficient in a very Harold Mitchell way." The proposal led to a series of video conferences between Harold and Lauren, with Nathan serving as the bridge between old-school financial thinking and innovative approaches. Watching my husband navigate this role, respectful of his father's expertise while confidently advocating for new methodologies, I saw him growing into a professional identity that honored his background without being limited by it. In our personal lives, the distance from Oakwood created space for gradual healing. Without the constant friction of daily Mitchell oversight, I found myself more able to appreciate the positive aspects of Nathan's family heritage, the emphasis on excellence, the value placed on education, the sense of responsibility to community that underlay even Barbara's most controlling behaviors. "Gamma asks when we visit," Zoe announced one evening after her weekly video call with Barbara. At nearly 3, her vocabulary was expanding rapidly, along with her awareness of the complex web of relationships surrounding her. "Thanksgiving," I reminded her. "Remember? We talked about going to Connecticut to see Gamma and Grandpa and your cousins for the holiday." Zoe nodded seriously. "Gamma says she has special dress for me. Pretty dress for important dinner." I exchanged a glance with Nathan, both of us recognizing the classic Barbara move, using gifts to reinforce her vision of proper Mitchell appearance, even from across the country. 6 months ago, this would have triggered immediate resistance. Now, I could see it for what it was: Barbara's imperfect way of maintaining connection with her granddaughter. "That's nice of Gamma," I said neutrally. "You can wear it for the special dinner if you want to, or you can wear something else. It's your choice." Zoe considered this novel concept with furrowed brow. "My choice? Gamma won't be sad?" "Gamma might be disappointed," Nathan answered honestly, "but she'll still love you. And it's important that you learn to make your own choices about things like what you wear." This middle path, acknowledging Barbara's preferences without allowing them to override Zoe's developing autonomy, felt like a healthier approach than either complete capitulation or reflexive rejection had been. It was a balance we were still learning to strike, but the distance of Denver made it easier to find this equilibrium. As Thanksgiving approached, our anticipation was mixed with apprehension. The Mitchell Altitude partnership was progressing well, with initial client response exceeding expectations. Harold had made 2 business trips to Denver, each time staying for dinner and spending time with Zoe, gradually relaxing from formal Mitchell patriarch to something closer to an ordinary grandfather building a relationship with his granddaughter. Barbara, however, remained a more complicated equation. Our video calls with her were cordial but carefully choreographed. She showed interest in Zoe's activities but minimal engagement with our Denver life, as if acknowledging our new home would somehow validate our decision to leave Oakwood. "Are you nervous about seeing her in person?" I asked Nathan the week before our planned trip east. We were in our kitchen, arranged for functionality rather than appearance, with children's artwork prominently displayed on the refrigerator in a way Barbara would never have permitted. A little, he admitted, chopping vegetables for dinner with the casual competence of a man who was learning to share household responsibilities rather than adhering to traditional Mitchell gender roles. Mom's been on her best behavior in the video calls, but that's different from 3 days under the same roof. We could stay at a hotel, I suggested, not for the first time. Give everyone some breathing room. Nathan shook his head. That would be the final insult in Mom's view, rejecting Mitchell hospitality. Besides, it's good for Zoe to experience the positive parts of that world, even if we've chosen a different path for our daily life. I understood his reasoning. Our decision to leave Oakwood hadn't been about erasing the Mitchell influence entirely. It had been about creating enough distance to develop our own family identity, while incorporating the valuable aspects of both our backgrounds. The flight to Connecticut brought a strange sense of dislocation, the familiar landscape of the East Coast suddenly looking foreign after months in the shadow of the Rockies. Zoe chattered excitedly about seeing her cousins and the promised dress from Gamma, her adaptable child's mind easily holding both her Denver life and her Connecticut connections without contradiction. Harold met us at the airport, his customary formality softened by genuine pleasure at seeing Zoe race toward him with outstretched arms. "There's my mountain girl," he said, scooping her up with surprising agility for a man in his 60s. "Have you been climbing those Colorado peaks already?" The drive to Oakwood was filled with Zoe's animated stories about her new preschool and friends, interspersed with Harold's careful updates on mutual acquaintances and business developments. I watched the familiar scenery pass, the manicured estates of Connecticut's wealthy enclaves, the historic town center of Oakwood with its carefully preserved colonial architecture, the winding road leading to Maple Avenue. When we turned onto the street that had been our home for 3 years, I felt Nathan tense beside me. Our former house, the Mitchell Satellite, as we'd privately called it, sat unchanged, now occupied by distant Mitchell cousins who had eagerly relocated from Boston when the property became available. "Looks exactly the same," Nathan murmured, as we passed. "Like we were never there at all." "That was always the point," I replied softly. "It was never meant to reflect us, just the Mitchell ideal." The main Mitchell estate appeared at the end of the street, imposing and perfect as ever, with Barbara standing on the front steps in a carefully casual pose that I knew had been calculated. For maximum effect, welcoming yet dignified, the appropriate Mitchell matriarch greeting returning family members. "Deep breath," Nathan whispered as Harold parked the car. "Remember why we're here, to honor connection without surrendering. Boundaries." Barbara's greeting was exactly as I'd expected. Warm embraces for Nathan and Zoe, a correct but reserved air kiss for me, immediate comments about Zoe's Colorado-influenced fashion choices. "Denim overalls for traveling? How practical," she observed with the familiar Mitchell skill of making criticism sound like neutral observation. "I've laid out some lovely outfits in your room, precious girl, much more suitable for Thanksgiving activities." Nathan caught my eye, a silent reminder of our agreement to pick our battles carefully during this visit. This wasn't one worth fighting, not in the first 5 minutes of our arrival. The house was exactly as we remembered, impeccably maintained, traditionally decorated, every object carefully selected and placed for maximum impression. Yet something had changed, not in the physical space, but in our perception of it. What had once seemed intimidating now felt merely formal. What had once represented the pinnacle of aspiration now seemed like just one option among many possible ways to live. "Your room is all prepared," Barbara announced, leading us up the grand staircase. "I've kept all the family photographs in place, Zoe, so you can remember your heritage." The guest suite, formerly Nathan's childhood bedroom, had indeed been preserved like a museum exhibit to Mitchell family history. Photos of Nathan at various Oakwood Academy functions lined the walls, joined now by carefully selected images of Zoe as a baby and toddler, always in her most traditional, Barbara-approved outfits. I noticed with inward amusement. It's like time stopped when we left, Nathan murmured as he unpacked our suitcases later. As if she's created a parallel universe where we never moved to Denver, just took an extended vacation. Does that bother you? I asked, genuinely curious about his reaction. He considered the question thoughtfully. 6 months ago, it would have felt suffocating, like she was erasing our choices. Now it just seems sad. Mom's clinging to a version of family that doesn't actually exist anymore. Dinner that evening brought the full Mitchell contingent together. Harold and Barbara at the heads of the table, Melissa and Christopher, with their children, a few Mitchell cousins who always participated in family holidays. The conversation flowed with practiced Mitchell efficiency, appropriate topics introduced at appropriate moments, potential conflicts diplomatically avoided, family achievements subtly highlighted. Nathan's partnership initiative has already attracted significant attention in the sustainable finance sector, Harold announced during the main course, his tone suggesting he'd personally orchestrated the collaboration rather than initially opposing it. 3 major clients have transferred substantial portfolios to the new investment vehicles. How wonderful, Barbara smiled tightly. Though I still don't entirely understand why such services couldn't have been developed within Mitchell Financial directly, without involving outside entities. And there it was, the persistent undercurrent of Mitchell resistance to change, the inability to fully acknowledge that improvement might come from beyond their carefully controlled universe. The collaboration allows both firms to leverage their strengths, Mother, Nathan replied evenly. Mitchell Financial brings established client relationships and infrastructure. Altitude contributes innovative methodologies and technological expertise. It's synergistic. Barbara's expression suggested synergistic was a suspicious concept invented primarily to justify decisions she didn't approve of, but she merely nodded and turned the conversation to Melissa's children's recent school achievements. Later that evening, after Zoe had been tucked into bed surrounded by Mitchell family heirlooms, Nathan and I escaped to the garden for a moment of peace. The November air was crisp, the formal landscaping silvered by moonlight. How are you holding? Up? Nathan asked, wrapping an arm around my shoulders as we walked the stone paths I'd once studied obsessively, trying to learn the rules of Mitchell garden maintenance. Better than I expected, I admitted. It's different coming back as visitors, rather than residents. The pressure feels less intense when we know we're leaving in 3 days. He nodded, guiding me toward the old gazebo at the edge of the property, one of the few places on the estate where we'd occasionally found privacy during our years on Maple Avenue. I was worried it would feel like being pulled back into orbit, he confessed as we settled on the weathered bench. That all our work to build something different would somehow evaporate once we were back in the Mitchell universe. But it hasn't. Because we're different now, I suggested. We know who we are outside of their expectations. That changes how we experience being here. The gazebo had once been a refuge from Barbara's constant oversight. Now it was simply a pleasant spot to enjoy a cool evening, no longer a hiding place but a vantage point from which to observe the Mitchell world with greater perspective. Thanksgiving Day itself brought the traditional Mitchell production, elaborate table settings, perfectly executed traditional dishes, carefully orchestrated family interactions designed to project harmony and continuity. Barbara presided over it all with characteristic precision, ensuring every detail aligned with Mitchell family standards. Zoe wore the dress Barbara had selected, a compromise we'd decided was worth making for a special occasion, but paired it with the turquoise cowboy boots a colleague's daughter had outgrown and passed along to her in Denver. The combination was pure Zoe, honoring both her Mitchell heritage and her emerging Colorado identity. Interesting footwear choice, Barbara observed when Zoe twirled to show off her outfit before dinner. Denver meets Connecticut, I explained, lightly. Zoe's embracing both parts of her heritage. Barbara's lips thinned slightly, but to my surprise, she didn't press the issue. The dress is beautiful on her, she said instead. She has the Mitchell posture, naturally elegant. It was a classic Barbara pivot, finding a way to acknowledge Zoe's individuality while still claiming it as a Mitchell trait. 6 months earlier, I might have bristled at the manipulation. Now I could recognize it as Barbara's imperfect attempt to bridge the gap between her expectations and our reality. The dinner conversation remained carefully within Mitchell-approved boundaries until dessert, when Zoe, uninhibited by adult social constraints, created an unexpected opening. "My room in Denver is purple," she announced proudly as Harold served her a small portion of pumpkin pie, "with stars on the ceiling that glow in dark, and I have big window to see mountains." Barbara set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "Purple? That's an energetic choice for a bedroom." "It was Zoe's decision," Nathan said, his tone pleasant but firm. "We believe in giving her age-appropriate choices about her environment." I braced for Barbara's critique of our parenting philosophy, but Harold intervened smoothly. "Mitchell women have always had strong opinions about design," he observed, with a rare hint of humor. "My mother insisted on crimson drapes in the dining room despite considerable opposition from her mother-in-law." This small acknowledgement of dissent within Mitchell history created an opening for more genuine conversation. Soon, Melissa was admitting she'd always hated the formal window treatments Barbara had selected for her childhood bedroom, and Christopher was sharing stories about his own family's less rigid approach to holidays. "Mom actually encouraged us to help cook Thanksgiving dinner," he recalled. "It was chaotic and imperfect, but some of my best childhood memories." "Perhaps Zoe would enjoy helping prepare the pies next year," Harold suggested, catching me by surprise with both the implied future invitation and the deviation from formal Mitchell dining protocol. "If you're planning to visit again for the holiday." "We'd like that," Nathan said, meeting his father's gaze with appreciation for the olive branch being extended. "Maybe we could host you in Denver sometime too, show you our side of the country." Barbara stiffened almost imperceptibly but said nothing, neither endorsing nor rejecting the invitation. It was progress of a sort, I supposed. 6 months earlier, she would have immediately listed all the reasons why visiting Denver was impractical or unnecessary. That evening, after the formal Thanksgiving rituals had concluded and the extended family had departed, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Barbara. I'd come down for a glass of water and found her meticulously arranging leftovers in her perfectly organized refrigerator. "You don't need to hover in the doorway, Olivia," she said without turning around. "I'm not going to bite." I smiled despite myself at her characteristic directness. "Just getting some water. Don't let me interrupt. Your system." She closed the refrigerator and faced me, her expression unreadable. "Your house in Denver," she said abruptly. "It looks comfortable in the video calls with Zoe." Coming from Barbara Mitchell, this was the equivalent of enthusiastic praise. "It is comfortable," I agreed. "It suits us." She nodded once, running a finger along the already spotless counter. "Different choices for different generations, I suppose. My mother-in-law told me once that I'd understand the importance of Mitchell traditions when I had my own children, that I'd appreciate what she was trying to preserve." The unexpected personal revelation caught me off guard. "Did you understand? I mean—" "Some of it," Barbara admitted, her gaze focused somewhere beyond the kitchen window. "The emphasis on education, on social responsibility, on maintaining certain standards. But she was wrong about one thing." "What was that?" "She believed there was only one correct way to be a Mitchell, one path that everyone must follow." Barbara's eyes refocused on me. I made the same mistake with Nathan. With you. The admission, so contrary to everything I thought I understood about Barbara Mitchell, left me momentarily speechless. I still believe in the value of tradition, she continued briskly, reverting to her more familiar tone. In the importance of maintaining certain standards. But Harold's partnership with this altitude company seems to be working well, and Zoe appears to be thriving in her new environment. It wasn't a full endorsement of our choices, but coming from Barbara, it was a remarkable concession. Thank you for saying that, I said simply. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge that different approaches can work. Barbara straightened her already perfect posture. Well, the purple bedroom is still questionable, but I suppose children's decorating choices have never been my area of expertise. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. My mother-in-law was horrified by the changes I made to this kitchen when Harold and I first married. Sometimes perspective requires generational distance. Our 3 days in Oakwood passed more comfortably than I could have imagined, with small moments of connection emerging through the formal Mitchell framework. Harold proudly showed Zoe his collection of historical maps, discovering her unexpected interest in how mountains were represented on paper. Melissa relaxed enough to admit she envied our Denver lifestyle, particularly the more balanced approach to work and family that Nathan described. Even Barbara found ways to engage with our new reality, asking surprisingly thoughtful questions about Zoe's progressive preschool and the neighborhood community we were building. When it was time to leave, the goodbyes held none of the tension of our departure 6 months earlier. Harold hugged us warmly, extracting promises of regular updates on both the business partnership and Zoe's activities. Melissa made tentative plans to visit in the spring, with or without Christopher depending on his work schedule. Barbara's farewell was characteristically complex, formal yet tinged with genuine emotion she couldn't quite suppress. You'll need warmer coats for the Colorado winter, she observed as we prepared to depart. I've taken the liberty of ordering appropriate outerwear for Zoe. It should arrive next week. Us? It was such a quintessentially Barbara gesture, practical yet controlling, supportive yet presumptuous, that Nathan and I exchanged amused glances over Zoe's head. That's thoughtful, Mom, Nathan said diplomatically. Though we've already found great outdoor gear in Denver. Yes, well, Mitchell children have always had proper winter attire, Barbara replied, unable to resist asserting family tradition. But then she added something unexpected. The coats can be returned if they don't suit Zoe's Colorado style. This small acknowledgement of Zoe's developing identity beyond Mitchell parameters felt significant. A micro-adjustment in Barbara's rigid worldview that suggested larger possibilities for future evolution. As our plane lifted, off from Connecticut soil, Zoe already dozing against Nathan's shoulder, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. We hadn't escaped the Mitchell influence entirely. That had never been the goal. Instead, we'd created enough distance to develop our own family culture while maintaining connections to the valuable aspects of Nathan's heritage. What are you thinking? Nathan asked quietly, reaching for my hand across the sleeping child between us. That we made the right choice, I replied. Not just for us, but maybe even for your parents. For the whole family dynamic. He nodded, glancing out the window at the fading East Coast landscape. Dad mentioned something interesting yesterday, said, watching our partnership with Altitude succeed has made him reconsider some other innovation proposals at Mitchell Financial. That sometimes it takes seeing change work elsewhere to recognize its value. Growth comes in unexpected ways, I observed, for all of us. Back in Denver, our house welcomed us with the comfortable familiarity of a space truly our own, Zoe's. Artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator, furniture arranged for conversation rather than impression. The magnificent mountain view that reminded us daily of the broader perspective we'd gained by leaving Oakwood. That evening, after unpacking and settling back into our routines, Nathan and I sat on our deck despite the November chill, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the stars emerge above the mountain silhouettes. "Do you know what I realized this weekend?" Nathan asked, his voice thoughtful in the gathering darkness. The Mitchell traditions aren't inherently oppressive. It was the insistence that they were the only valid choices that made them feel that way. "Some traditions are worth preserving," I agreed. "Just not at the expense of discovering new ones that might work better for our family." He reached for my hand, our fingers intertwining comfortably. "Maybe that's the real legacy we'll give Zoe. Not just Mitchell history or Taylor values, but the confidence to find her own path while honoring what came before." As if summoned by her name, Zoe's voice called from her bedroom window above us. "Mommy, Daddy, I can see stars from my purple room." We laughed, the sound carrying clearly. In the crisp mountain air, so different from the restrained Mitchell chuckles appropriate for Oakwood social gatherings. "Different stars out here," Nathan called back. "New constellations to learn. New patterns forming from ancient lights," I thought. Not unlike our family finding its own configuration while remaining connected to deeper histories. The distance from Oakwood hadn't severed those connections. It had transformed them into something healthier, more balanced, more genuinely supportive. As we headed inside to tuck Zoe back into bed, I caught sight of our reflection in the glass doors, not perfect Mitchell composures, not revolutionary rebels, just a family finding its own authentic way forward between tradition and innovation, between roots and wings. The in-laws next door had shaped us in ways both challenging and valuable. But here, with mountains instead of expectations on our horizon, we were finally writing our own story. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.